Eric, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Hi, yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I am a philosopher, professor of philosophy at William Patterson University, and I work mostly on new and emerging religions and different ways people think about those kinds of issues philosophically. Atheism, paganism, whatever, you name it. If it's new and interesting, I'm interested in it.
Cool. So the topic today was about atheistic Platonism. Could you tell me your position on that and why we should believe in it, or what reasons there are to believe in it?
Right, sure. So, Platonism in both the classical and kind of very new forms, it's often associated with theism, right? With belief in particularly an Abrahamic or Christian God. Christianity took over a lot of Platonism, a lot of Neoplatonism in its early days. And so people have just thought that that association was, automatic. And it's not. And so Platonism generally tends to say things like there are abstract objects, right? And abstract objects are things like mathematical objects, right? Or moral values and moral rules and laws. And those objects can be thought of in various ways. But the idea there is that if you've got abstract objects, you don't need God. Right, God did a lot of work, or does a lot of work in Abrahamic systems, particularly here. I'm thinking of Christianity. But if you've got abstract objects, you don't need God. If there's an eternal realm of moral truths, for instance, moral laws and moral values, right? Christians said, oh, you have to have God to have morality, to have objective morality. And this is not really a new position, atheistic Platonism. It's been discussed in the literature, but it's never really been developed, I think. And so I've been working on developing it, bringing out the consequences, talking about the ways that it's useful for people today. And so that's in a nutshell, right? Atheistic Platonism deals with the four M's that naturalism often has trouble with, which is, mentality, modality, the theory of possibility and necessity, mathematics, and morality.
Cool. So I agree. I've been using Platonism as essentially alternative view of theism, saying, "Oh, you whatever they say God can do, no, you can do it with Platonic objects." So I totally agree on that front. But I don't actually believe Platonic objects exist. I think I use just a parody position to show there are other logical possibilities to a God to explain whatever theists think you need a God to explain. So could you tell me what reasons you think there are to believe in Platonic objects as opposed to a more naturalistic framework or a nominalist framework?
Yeah, I mean, I think sure, that's a great point. I mean, I think first of all that abstract objects, right, there is a long, and this is a theistic view of abstract objects. I'm going to say this, right, that people have thought of abstract objects as these things that are in some kind of heaven. They're far away from the physical universe. They're not embedded or structuring physics. They are, okay, they're just not in space and time. They don't causally interact with anything. I think this is a completely wrong-headed view of abstracta, and it's not a view that, as far as I can tell, anyone until the 20th century actually held. Right? I mean, the numbers they're not somewhere else. They're here. Space and time themselves are mathematical structures. Physical things are mathematical structures. So this is a kind of structuralism. I mean, I don't want to get too technical, but people might be familiar with physicists, cosmologists like Max Tegmark, who's developed this kind of idea, right? And it's actually a common theme in physics, right? That the table that you're, sitting at, or this chair that I'm sitting on, well, what's that? So it's material. It's made of, protons and neutrons and electrons, quarks and leptons. And what are those things? Those are, modulations of quantum fields. And what's a quantum field? Well, quantum field is a complex mathematical object, right? Or what's Hilbert space? It's a mathematical object. So it just strikes me that if there's a dualism, right? I don't like dualisms. I don't like mind-body dualism. I don't like abstract concrete dualism, because then you get these insoluble problems. And you'd be right. If it were a dualistic framework, you'd be absolutely right to say, forget it. Why believe in that stuff? So you got to believe that the Pythagorean theorem is actually constraining your actions whenever you try to do something in space. Like geometry isn't somewhere else. Geometry is right here. You're in it. You live in it. And so I think those kinds of arguments that are being made in mathematical physics are really good reasons to think that, yeah, you and I live, move, and have our being in a mathematical structure. And the numbers aren't somewhere else. They're here. And these structures aren't in some heavenly realm, right? Disconnected from the physical. They are physical. So, like Tegmark says, physical existence is mathematical existence. There's no distinction. So I think that that's a good way of looking at abstract objects, and that's where I would start.
I'm not sure I understand what that would mean, because the way I envision it is like numbers and abstract objects are things that are constructed by human minds and do no work in the universe. They don't exist any more than the word tree exists. And it's mostly just describing some natural state of affairs. And so there's a natural property of an object. And the number we made up doesn't denote any property or anything in and of itself. It's just describing the essence of the object. And so what would it mean for abstract objects to be physical but still abstract? Because normally abstract is a non-concrete object of some kind. So I don't know what it would mean for an abstract object to be physical.
Yeah, I mean, sure. One might say that some abstract objects are concrete and some are not. But what would it mean for them to be physical would simply be to say that the space-time in which you live is a mathematical structure. It's right. It's Minkowski space-time. This is a mathematical structure. That's where your body is located, and your body itself is the result of a complex, process happening in quantum fields. And these are mathematical objects. So we didn't make, space-time is not something that was created by a human mind. And I could give you a very concrete example, right, which is, again, the Pythagorean theorem. If you've got some pieces of wood and you want to make a right triangle, or, indeed, anytime you parallel park your car, you use the Pythagorean theorem. But if you want to cut 3 pieces of wood and make a right triangle, the Pythagorean theorem forces you into cutting those lengths in a certain relation, whether you like it or not, whether you think, right, there's a good reason to think, mathematical objects are not mental or subjective, is you don't have any freedom in your mind to change their relationships, right? I can, if I have an idea in fiction, like I'm writing a fantasy novel or something, and I want to change a character, I can just do that. There's no way at all you can change the relations among numbers or relations among geometrical patterns. And they have objectivity in the sense that no other human being can do that either. And if you work together with other human beings to measure, to count, to do things like that, you will find yourself forced against your will into certain patterns that seem to exist independent of, both of you or all of you. And so humans around the world have come up with the same mathematical structures because, a Platonist would say, obviously, and Platonism could be wrong. A Platonist would say those structures exist. I do think you're right in pointing out that there are bad ways to think about those kinds of structures, right? Thinking about them. If the number 2 is an idea in your mind or my mind, which one is the number 2? Are there 2 number 2s? Are they different? Why do we always come up with the same results? Right there. These are kind of old school arguments, but yeah, sure. You can and the Platonism that I have is very close to nominalism in a lot of ways, because lots of Platonic objects are just the physical objects of our world. Don't know if that helps.
Sort of, in some ways, yeah, in some ways, no. So when I think of like mathematical relationships that you say we are objectively forced in accepting, that's kind of like any sentence that describes reality corresponds to reality. Like, we can't affect that. Either the sentence corresponds to reality or it doesn't. Reality is set, has some set variables to it. We don't have any effect on them. So if I say there are 9 planets or whatever in our solar system, that statement is true, and nothing I can say will change the truthiness of that statement. Um, same with anybody else. You can change the sentence any way you want, the descriptors or what the words mean or something. But if the words correspond to reality, the fact that they correspond to reality is independent of what anybody says. You don't get an opinion on it. I think math is kind of the same way, in that it's a sentence made up by humans with just arbitrary words. But when you make those words correspond to reality, that's when we don't have any control over them anymore. And so the relationships like the Pythagorean theorem or the transitive property or whatever are only unchangeable insofar as they correspond to something in reality outside of just the mathematical descriptions. And so I think that's what makes them true, independent of what we want, or we can't subjectively change them, is the fact that they correspond to some aspect of reality or patterns in reality. But I'm still not sure what it would mean for those things to exist in and of themselves in some way as a physical platonic object in some sense, because I see them as no different as words. And I think would you say that words are not platonic objects, like the word tree isn't a platonic object? Or
No, that's just a word,
right.
right? I mean, so yeah, that I mean, I think there's another point which is probably the more interesting one, right? Because Platonists and nominalists have been arguing for 25 centuries, and nobody's going to change anybody's mind on that. Except there might be a different way to approach this, which is to say, what's the payoff, right? What's the payoff if you're a Platonist versus what's the payoff if you're a nominalist? For me, dealing with a lot of these issues, specifically in theology, right? The payoff is I get an atheism that can do a lot of things that other atheisms can't do. And it's an atheism that ends up being, I think, far more competitive with theism, right? One of the big arguments against atheism, it's a tired argument, and I don't find it very impressive, but atheists, can't have any morality. They can't have any, objective morality. They can't. It's just opinion, right? If you like murdering people, that's just as valid as if you like helping people. See, you atheists have no morals. You're immoral, which means, of course, you're evil. And Platonism can really challenge that, right? And a deeper challenge that Platonism makes to theism is when you start to get under the hood, open up the hood and look at the engine of theism, there's an enormous amount of Platonism there. And theists have kept that Platonism pretty much buried under the hood, don't look under there. But once you expose that, you see suddenly, like, God isn't really doing any work in the system. God is, as a person, an immaterial mind or a spirit of some kind, isn't doing anything except maybe making somebody you think you can talk to or something like that. And even if you look at the classical, the 5 ways to prove the existence of God, each one of them relies on a Platonic structure. And so Platonism's doing the work. And if that's what it's doing, then why not just get rid of God? And you've got an atheism that can actually now compete with theism on the very points that theists hold most dear, right? So that's there are lots of payoffs like that, I think, that you get. And again, Platonism could be wrong, right? I can't prove to you or anyone that it's true. Right. I can point to benefits. I can give arguments, but there are counter arguments too. And so what I think is the most interesting thing is what are the payoffs, right? What do we get from adopting a worldview? And it ends up being a very different worldview. So I think the payoffs really, really help.
Well, what do you mean by a payoff in that context of saying that Platonism solves a problem that naturalism doesn't, in that we can't get morality? Because I'm a moral realist, so I also believe in objective morality. But I think it's better to say it's an undiscovered law of physics or something. I think that would work equally as well. I don't understand why positing a Platonic object would be better in this context. Because, like, obviously, any worldview can just make up a hypothetical and say, here's the solution, it's this. But why would I mean, I would put a Platonic object as more reasonable than a God, because God has a whole bunch of other entailments as well. But I'd still put it as less reasonable than, say, an undiscovered law of physics or higher order emergent property, something like moral naturalism. Why would believing in Platonism be an advantage here when talking about objective morality as opposed to just a moral naturalist view?
Yeah. I mean, look, well, first of all, I'm going to say that, laws of physics are Platonic objects, right? Laws of physics are propositions of a certain kind. They involve universals. They almost always involve numbers. And they involve other mathematical objects like, tensor spaces and Lie algebras and all kinds of complicated things. So I'm perfectly happy saying the laws of physics are Platonic objects. Because again, in this case, right, the mathematical and the physical just coincide. They're not different. Now, I think the moral naturalism point that you raise is not. See, I think a lot of these things are not things that are worth arguing over or fighting over, because we're going to come to the same conclusion at the end. The entailment structure is going to be the same. And in that sense, right, I'm happy with a lot of what's, often called a kind of Aristotelian approach to mathematics. I mean, it's not, I don't agree with it, but I'm perfectly happy with it. And Aristotelians, there's been a revival of Aristotelian approaches to mathematics in philosophy recently, where people are saying like, oh, look, you say the patterns really are structures that objectively exist. And, Platonism maybe goes a little overboard with these structures, right? And so you can be an Aristotelian realist about mathematical structures, about numbers and things like that. And that's a way of really saying they're anchored in reality, physical reality. It's a little different than the kind of, Pythagorean way that I like. But in other words, you and I aren't going to disagree about those kinds of points. And where we might disagree about things might be pretty far away and not very practically relevant. It
Well, just
might
to just
be.
to clarify,
Yeah.
like I would say
Yeah.
that what I would describe the disagreement as is I think numbers are literally no different than English words, the word tree or potato, something completely and wholly invented by humans and don't in any way exist in reality whatsoever. And I think that only things in physics, as in not the math, I think the math is the description of the things, but is not the thing. So they are separable. I don't think the math is the physical reality. I think the physical reality is something that exists, and then the math just describes that thing. So, like
Well,
the
one might ask you, what are the things?
no idea.
Well, okay, but then I think that that's a position that's not going to be very attractive, right? I mean, no idea seems like a mystery. Why not just say God? I mean, you got to have some idea, even if the idea is wrong.
I don't think
And
so. I mean, I think
well,
saying you don't know is usually a better hypothesis than trying to make up an alternative that has no basis or something. So I think I don't know would be better than God for
oh
sure.
well, mathematics has
But
a basis. I mean, it's used in science. Let's not forget that.
sure,
But I mean, I hear you. I just don't think that those are the issues that are going to have much traction, in the sense of what I'm interested in doing is showing how Platonism, right, and possibly a kind of Aristotelianism, but Platonism can give me all these advantages as an atheist,
well,
right?
that's what I'm trying to understand. I don't
Yeah.
see the advantages here because it seems like I can get all of the same advantages without positing numbers exist in any sense, and that seems more attractive to me because um, it seems like your worldview, from my perspective, is essentially saying the word tree exists, and that to me seems very unattractive. Like
Well, the
that's
word
I
tree
don't
does exist. You just said it.
no, I
I
mean like
mean,
as an independent mind independent object. So it's like
yeah.
this is not just something humans have constructed. This is a thing that exists objectively in the universe in some sense, and for figments of language that are seemingly just a product of human imagination, it seems like a consequence that you have to posit that there's these existing words. And that to me seems like a positing a new ontology that doesn't have any evidence as far as I can tell. And so I would see that as unattractive versus saying that they're just a figment of our imagination that describe a nature in reality that's just like physical energy and matter and motion or whatever. That part I'm fine with. And so that part seems more attractive to me. And if I can get all of the benefits without positing that words or numbers exist, then it seems like that worldview would be simpler and better in some context than a world that posits they exist to get the same benefits.
Yeah, it would be curious to me to hear what you think then of the fact that things like numbers appear in physical laws, or more deeply, mathematical structures like Hilbert spaces and Lie algebras appear in physical laws. I mean, it seems strange to say that, a proton, a quark rather, is a certain type of topological defect in a quantum field. And what's the quantum field? Where it's this complex, mapping from, points in a Minkowski space-time to tensors, or to matrices in a Lie algebra. What do you think protons are?
I think it's literally just energy. I think the math does nothing but describe the nature of energy, and that's it. So
What's the
it's like,
energy?
I don't know how to answer that question, but it's like the
But
fact
I
that you
do.
can, well, anybody can make up an answer. That part's
No,
easy.
physicists have made up this answer, not me. I'm not a physicist, right?
A
I
small
mean,
minority have made up that answer, and a majority of them are just straight up no. But
well, no, that's actually not true. I mean, the vast majority of them, are, first of all, the vast majority of them will say, look, this isn't physics, this is philosophy, and you should turn to philosophers. That's fine. But, quantum field theory is the best theory we have.
Right.
And
But the
so,
interpretations of quantum field theory most of them don't entail that mathematical objects actually exist. And most of the physicists say we don't care what philosophers think whatsoever. Seems to be the stronger
no, that's not
consensus.
true at all. I mean, for instance, I think you would now, again, what would sociology tell us? It won't tell us the truth, right? If we take a vote, but I'm pretty sure if you took a vote and asked physicists if Hilbert spaces are real, they would say yes. Because if they're not, then quantum field theory is just an illusion. And it's just something we made up arbitrarily with our minds. These are a bunch of arbitrary human symbols. They have no objective meaning, the patterning and structure of the world. But I still think, right? I still think the question is the better one that you asked, the deeper one is, is there really a payoff, right? I mean, is there really something I can
Oh,
do
I
that?
forgot to answer your question about what do I think, or I forget what it exactly was, but I think that the mathematical objects are kind of like drawing a mountain on a map. Like obviously you can draw a mountain on a map and it can describe or correspond to reality, but that doesn't mean reality is made of a map. It's just a representation of the thing. And
Well,
so I think,
if you draw a whole bunch of symbols, that describe a Hilbert space, but you say they're not describing anything, but they correspond to reality. I mean,
well,
why does it work?
they do like maps describe things and they work even though they aren't made of a map. So the fact that the math describes reality doesn't mean reality is made
Yeah,
of math.
certainly, but I wouldn't confuse, right? Certainly the map, like a math book or a textbook, which is, a human product. I wouldn't confuse that. I wouldn't confuse the English word two with the number two. I mean, if saying that, quarks are topological defects in, a certain type of Hilbert space or a certain type of Lie algebra, that works. And so those symbols are describing objective features of physical reality. And now, sure, maybe you want to say those aren't really Platonic abstract objects. And at that point, that's neither here nor there as far as I'm concerned, because the structure is there. Physical reality has a structure. And the Platonist just says that structure is mathematical. And if you want to say, and again, one way to go is to be an Aristotelian and say, yeah, that structure is mathematical, it's physical, it's a physical structure in the physical world, and Hilbert spaces are real. They're just not the way the Platonist conceived of them. That's fine. I don't see where that really gets us to any point.
Oh, my
I do.
question would be is why would taking your position give us an advantage over taking that nominalist position and saying, no, they don't exist at all? Like, what is the advantage there? Because I don't see an advantage.
Yeah, that I think is the better and much more interesting. That's where I have to do real work, right? So you're right to press on that, exactly that point. Um, and I would say that there are questions. So, first of all, there are questions about meaning and objectivity, right? And one of the things theists have to ground all, questions about meaning and objectivity is God, the mind of God, right? If you want a final, ultimate authority for anything that we have to think about or make decisions about, it's God. And God, the mind of God has a certain structure. that structure is. So rationality here is going to be a key word, right? The mind of God is rational. It's a mind. God is a reasoner. God gives reasons for things. There's a reason why I got sick. There's a reason why the Pythagorean theorem works. And all this rationality is grounded in this mind that is all knowing, it's all good, and it's all powerful too. But in this case, rationality, the rationality of the world. So I'm going to claim that the world has a rationality. The world is a rational world is a rationally organized structure, and that includes our physical universe. It's rationally organized. The back to the modality point, another one of the M's, right? The modal properties of the world, what's possible and what's necessary, those are also rationally organized. This is why science works. And I mean, there has to be, theists will give you an explanation for why science works. It works because the universe and the world was created by a rational mind, by a God. And so things are rationally ordered. And once you start to say stuff is just arbitrary or humans made it up, well, first of all, there was a time before which there were no humans. Did the world have no structure then? That seems a bit odd. There will certainly be a time when there are no more humans anymore. Will all the structure of the world be gone? That seems a bit odd too. And when you look at morality and you look at mathematics and you look at modality and even mentality, right? Because presumably the reason science works is because the rationality of the human mind is interfacing with the rationality of the world. If the world were irrational or we were irrational, we wouldn't be able to understand it very well. And so now you've got an ability, the Platonist here, the atheistic Platonist has an ability to challenge theists and say, yeah, I think the world is rationally organized. Now we can debate about what exactly that means metaphysically. Does that mean there really are Platonic objects or not? That's an interesting, I mean, I love that debate, but maybe it's not relevant. The more deeper practical issue is going to be like, yeah, I don't think all this structure came from human minds because I don't think that the death of God means humans take the place of God. I don't believe there's any place for God at all. And so the world is rational, humans are rational, and that rationality is objectively real. It's a fact that humans cannot change. Humans have to obey it if humans want to be successful. I mean, you can be irrational, jump off a mountain, think you can fly, and the rational structure of the world is going to quickly remove you. So, I think things like evolution, right? Evolution by natural selection is an optimization algorithm. I can define this optimize. I mean, biologists do. I'm just following biology here.
Well,
But I
just
think,
to
yeah,
clarify, could you tell me, like, I don't understand what it means when you say that there is a rationality in the world. Like, I agree that, like, the table is red. I don't think that it's made red by some rationality principle. I think there's a property in it that reflects light at a certain wavelength and that makes it red. And so I think the same thing would be true of the structures in the world. So I think the structures of objects is not because it has some rationality. I think that the structures are because of some physical property, like it has X mass or whatever. And that's not a mathematical object, it's just a physical property of the thing. And so the rationality is us simply describing that it has that. Now, obviously, our rationality doesn't give it the mass. The mass was always in it before we existed. And so us just describing the mass with some rationality doesn't make it have mass. The mass is a physical property in the thing that's made of a physical object, not a mathematical rationality relationship. So I'm not sure what would be the advantage here that you would gain from adding that in.
yeah. I mean, I think sure. Let's go to the rationality point. I mean, in part, that means that the world, and maybe I should use a different world, right? The world has a logical structure, right? Things like, in fact, one of the most amazing illustrations of that structure is the fact that you and I are doing this on a computer, right? I mean, it's an odd thing to wonder why you can build computers in physics. And that's not obvious. And there are very strange questions that emerge immediately about physics as soon as you turn to something like computability theory. So logic, of course, we mentioned math, but rationality of the world means that these kinds of disciplines, logic, mathematics, computer science, they objectively work. And it also means humans can figure things out. You can use the reasoning power. I mean, why does science work at all? And why can human brains, right? Why can human brains discover these deep patterns in the world? Whatever you think the patterns are, right? Because technical questions about what the patterns might be maybe are distracting, but there is a structure of the world, and the structure of the world is such that you can give reasons for why things happened. So in physics, one can give a reason, why did this event happen? It's not arbitrary, it's not random, and it's not simply a necessity that has a regularity that reason doesn't understand. You say why, you can answer why questions. And the rationality of the world is about the ability of reason to give explanations. In other words, a rationalist is going to be an explanatory realist. There are real explanations, and those explanations involve real patterns. Theists have always put those in the mind of God. So a Platonist is just going to say, no, they're not in the mind of any God at all. You don't need a mind to have rational explanation. You don't need a mind behind physics, or behind the world, to explain why reason is effective and why we can give rational explanations that rely on rational patterns. And that holds for morality as well as mathematics, right? It holds for modality too, when you talk about what's possible. And so, I don't know if you're leaning more towards empiricism of some kind here, but all that stuff's going to have trouble with modality, with the issues of rationality and things like that. So I think atheistic Platonism gives theism a much better run for its money, in part because it's already there, and you can show the theist, look, just get rid of the God. You don't need the God for any of the things that you think are important. That's a very different challenge than I think any other form of atheism has made to theism.
Why couldn't empiricism do the same thing?
Well, empiricism faces a real problem with its rationality. Why believe in empiricism? What's a principle of empiricism? A verification principle? I mean, this is an interesting problem, because I see this often in kind of internet groups and things like this. People say things like, well, if there's no evidence for something, then it's false. I'm like, okay, what's the evidence for that? And then you just hear crickets, right? Because I mean, the verification principle, any verification principle at all, is self-refuting. You apply it to yourself and it shows that it's meaningless. This is a grounding problem for empiricism, which has been known since the famous debate between A.J. Ayer and Copleston, right, back in 1936 on the BBC, long ago, right? And Copleston asks Ayer, what happens if we apply your verification principle to itself? And Ayer's like, so
I think the typical answer is that verification is about claims external to your mind. Subjective mental claims, conceptual claims, they don't require verification. They're verified simply by thinking about them or something along those lines. So there's a difference between conceptual claims and a posteriori or synthetic claims about the world.
Well, why think any of that is true?
Because there seems to be a difference between stuff I think about, like numbers, and things I see, which aren't numbers. But I'm not seeing the relevance there to how does that provide a difference to like what we can say to theism, because I can say there's an objective morality under or I think you said rationality was the one you bring up. So what is the problem with rationality here? That because if I start with like cogito, I think therefore I am, there's some difference between my imagination and the things I experience. Numbers seem to be of the kind of my imaginary stuff, and tables don't. They seem to be of the real stuff. And I can seem to
I'm
ground
always
knowledge on that.
curious why anyone would come to that conclusion, like certainly from the cogito. I mean, certainly Descartes didn't. That's very, very interesting why one would start with a position that seems to be completely anti-empirical. I mean, the cogito is not an empirical fact or an empirical truth or an empirical pattern, right? The cogito is something about pure reason, the power of pure reason to demonstrate the existence of an object. And that has nothing to do with anything one would observe. And
I'm observing the thoughts. The thoughts are literally an observation
you're
you're
not
having,
observing
but
the thought.
Well, I am. I literally have an experience of them. That is a thing I'm observing. But
With
so I
which
have.
sense are you observing it?
Well, I'm counting thoughts as a sense here, so I don't even know if there are such things as senses at this point. They're just I have an experience, and that
Yeah, but
experience
if
of
you have an experience, right?
yeah,
And now what is it that tells you that you exist in the cogito?
the experience is synonymous with the existence. Those are synonyms.
Well, no, you would have to make an argument. You would have to say, if I, like Descartes did, right? Picking it up from Augustine, Descartes says, well, if I didn't exist, then I wouldn't be able to have this thought. And you've
Well,
just
I don't
made,
need to do any of that. I can just the existence. This thought is the existence. Those are synonyms. There's no argument. This is they're
no, you
synonyms.
don't, you don't, you don't, that's just completely irrational.
What?
There's no inference there. You can't say like suddenly you're saying like there's an I and you know there's this I and there's a thought and you know there's this
Those
thought.
are all
How did you get this
synonyms.
knowledge?
Those are all synonyms. So the thoughts are. I'm having these thoughts. These thoughts are there. I am those thoughts. Those thoughts exist, and I am those are all synonyms. There's not any extra claims there. The thoughts are me. The thoughts exist. Those are all the same.
Those are enormous claims. Those are
Well,
enormous claims. You made a whole bunch of existence claims. You made a whole bunch of identity claims, and you might be right. I mean, you could be completely correct, right? But you need to give me some reasons why I think that there's an I that's identical with its thinking. I mean, I
well,
mean, I'm supposed to
I'm just using
listen.
the word I to refer to the thinking.
Yeah, man,
So
that's just words. You're just making
yes,
arbitrary words. These are just
yes,
words.
well, yeah.
You
There's a
believe
thing.
words are objectively real now? When it goes into your
No,
mind, you suddenly become a Platonist?
no. My existence, the direct experience, the quality experience I'm having, is a real thing. It objectively
Dude,
exists.
your
But
ego is an illusion.
I can refer to
Your
that with
ego is an
words.
illusion, man.
Ego is an illusion. It can't. How is it an illusion that I'm having quality experience?
Yeah. There's something to, I mean, first of all, we could just turn to all the Buddhists right there. We could turn to Sam Harris. We could turn to psychedelics. We could turn to all the reasons to think that your ego is an illusion. There is no I. It's a very complex, the
Okay,
whole, um,
how does any of that show my quality experience right now doesn't exist?
how does it show that what doesn't exist?
My quality experience.
Your qualia experience?
Yeah, direct
What's a
experience.
qualia?
What direct experience? Direct
Are
personal
qualia
subjective experience.
observable?
From my perspective of the qualia, yes.
Can anybody else observe them?
No, but I don't need anybody else to. It's
No.
not so much of my
How do
question.
you know you're not observing them with this? They're not in the physical world. You're not observing them with
What?
a sense. They're not measurable by a detector of any kind. You can't see them under a
No,
microscope or in a particle accelerator.
but I didn't claim any of that.
You claim something exists.
Yeah, my qualia. So I have a direct experience, and that direct experience exists.
And why should I believe you?
Well, I don't care if you believe me. It's not whether you believe me.
Well, right. But you could take this and now you're making existence claims about of a certain kind that you don't seem to want to extend to numbers. I mean, suppose I just said, well, look, numbers, man, I intuit numbers. They exist as much as your qualia. I mean, what refutation could you possibly, I mean, I don't think that's correct, right? But
Well,
it is interesting. Look, take a step back philosophically, take a step back and see that what you're doing with respect to your own mentality is exactly the same system of moves that a Platonist would do to physical structures.
wait,
There's
what?
no difference here.
I'm not. So mine in my claim, I'm saying that I have an experience that exists prior to any other thoughts I have, and it is
What's the
the
argument for that existence?
it's an objective fact. I'm having qualia is a thing that exists. I
An
am experiencing it.
objective fact
But
is a
there's a
fact
difference
that's
here between
curable.
that and numbers. Numbers are not a thing that generates your thoughts.
How do you know
Experience.
that?
Um,
Maybe you haven't
bec-
gone deep enough into your mind.
well, I don't know anyone who claims that's not part of the hypothesis of numbers, as far as I'm aware. That I don't think anyone thinks numbers generate consciousness of some kind. But
Well, there are people who work on neural networks and say that consciousness is generated by matrix algebra.
okay,
The numbers that are and one might say that when you have thoughts, certainly numbers are required because you can count them.
well, that's again a
And
different claim, saying that like I could say the word consciousness is required to describe
yeah,
consciousness, but that's
okay,
just
sure,
false.
sure enough,
But there's a
sure.
difference between saying the experience exists and saying something X exists to preclude the experience or something. those are two separate claims. One includes just the minimum facts of the experience, and one includes some further prerequisites of what's causing that. So obviously, like, I couldn't say I'm a biological mass based off of this, because I could be in the matrix, who knows. And so the same problem would happen if you claimed numbers were generating consciousness, just like if you're claiming the biological mass was creating consciousness, because you could be wrong about that. But just saying the experience itself exists, that part you can't be wrong about, because you are the experience. And so there's this.
Of course, you can be wrong about that. You can be massively deceived about that. You can be completely 100% wrong about that. You can be living in an
Okay,
illusion.
explain
Your very
how.
self can be an illusion. And I
How can
think
my quality
that's,
experience be an illusion?
well, I don't know what qualia are. I mean, first of all, I have no clue what those things are that you're talking about. Angels or something here?
It's just
What are
direct
qualia?
personal quality, just direct personal experience. That's all it is. Personal subjective experience.
What
That's
does
it.
it mean, direct personal? What's a person? What's
Uh,
experience? What's direct?
just the thoughts. The thoughts are. That's it. Thoughts exist.
Thoughts exist, and
Yeah.
you say they exist objectively.
Yes. I don't think you can exist
Are your
subjectively.
thoughts the same as my thoughts?
Probably not.
But if I think I exist and you think you exist, what's the difference? Can't be our
Um,
bodies because we don't know if we're bodies. Can't be
well, there's
numbers because we
some
don't know if they're
variable that
numbers.
separates them. Most likely is maybe location. Location's a
But we don't
possibility.
know if we're in space. Space could be an
Right.
illusion.
Right. I'm just giving a hypothetical. There's, if they were different, if they both existed, they would be separated by some variable, which, like, one possibility
Right.
would be
But
space.
what you've come to, right, with the cogito and these kinds of things, although we'll leave the mysticism of qualia to the side,
Well, no, I want to go back
is
to that, because you keep saying that my quality can be
yeah,
false, and
yeah,
it
we
just
can,
seems
but
like
sure,
gibberish.
and those are good questions. Those are real sharp questions. I mean that you've got all these things that you've posited for which you can't give me any reason why I should believe you're not massively deceived about yourself. And in any
Well, I'm
case,
not following that. So
even if we
I have
weren't,
quality experience. How could I possibly be like, if the only way I could be deceived by that is if I'm a zombie, a
yeah, it's
T
beautiful,
zombie.
isn't it? It's beautiful. The deception. This is, I mean, and you don't care about me. I mean, start to read some Buddhist texts, start to look at, some
Well,
Sam
there's,
Harris
I don't need to
writing
read
about
any of
this.
those. All you need to do is just explain to me how any of those could show my quality experience can be wrong. How can I be wrong that I
I
exist?
can't, you know what? I don't know what that experience is. It has
It
no
doesn't matter what it
objectivity,
is. If
right?
I'm having an experience, whatever that experience is, proves that the experience exists.
Why should I believe this?
I don't
I
need you
can't
to believe
see
it.
it.
You don't matter here, because I'm starting with I think, therefore I am, not I. You need to know I believe.
So you're a
So
solipsist.
epistemic solipsism starts with that. That's how I ground science and stuff. But the point here is that no, I cannot be wrong about that. I cannot be wrong that my quality experience exists. I can't be wrong about that. No
You
matter what Buddhism says, no matter what Sam Harris says, I cannot ever, under any logical circumstances, be wrong about that.
so you think that all the authority for truth comes from your own ego. Truth comes from your own ego.
Um, no, truth comes from a correspondence to reality. I would say justification comes from the
Well,
ego.
how do you know that
Belief,
these thoughts about your qualia correspond to reality? Look, the
because
main
if
argument that anybody's going to make is none of this stuff is observable. None of it's
it
objective. You're
doesn't
making
need,
claims.
none
I
of that
could
matters to the
program
argument. That's literally irrelevant. Like saying, "Oh, pink unicorns." Like, I don't care. Like, all I need to say is that I have a direct experience.
I
Now,
can program a computer to say all the words you're
yes,
saying, and it probably
it's
doesn't have
true.
any direct experience at all.
It's true. So it's possible, like, if I don't actually have experience, then yes, that would be a way that the statement would be false. But if I do, whether you know it or not, if I do, then I do have knowledge,
Well,
and it can't
yes,
be
it's
wrong.
it's true. If I grant your premises, I'll grant your conclusion. That's obvious.
Right. So
But
if there
that's
is a
not our
quality
question here.
experience and it's
I don't know what
there,
qualia are.
it's
Don't know
direct
what they
experience.
are.
It's direct experience. Like,
But I don't know that I have direct experience. I don't know what that is. And I do
I
know
don't.
things like I'm looking at a blue coffee cup, but the coffee cup's
So you
out
do have direct
there.
experience. Like, it doesn't matter
No,
if, wait, you just
no,
described it. So you do know what
no, I
it is.
didn't. I described a
How did
coffee
you,
cup.
right. So you have an experience of a coffee cup,
No,
right?
no,
What?
I don't see anywhere where if I say my coffee cup is blue or Even I'm looking at a blue coffee cup. I didn't say anything about experience or qualia or anything like that's a complicated theory made up by philosophers. I know their names, used to go to bars with them.
Well,
And
what do you think?
so
What do you think the difference between looking and experience is? Looking at a coffee cup and
looking is
having an
something I'm
experience of a
doing.
coffee cup.
Nowhere in that statement, to be technical, is there an existential quantifier that says there exists some X such that X is a direct experience or X is a qualia. I never said anything about those things. I said something about a
What
coffee
is the
cup.
difference between I'm looking at a coffee cup and I have an experience of a coffee cup?
I'm looking at a coffee cup as something I'm doing with my body.
Yes.
Right. That can be physically measured. It can be objectively observed with scientific instruments. The coffee cup is here. People can measure its reflectance and wavelengths of light, all that sort of thing. These are objective structures that are outside of my mind. In fact, I don't even have a mind. And I see no reason why I would believe in the existence of a mind. And so, unless you want to just say my mind is my brain, that's fine with me.
I'm a materialist, so
Um,
I would say that.
yeah, so I don't know what all this other stuff is. I have nerve cells, I have eyes, I have a retina, right? And there's some light waves impinging on the retina. And so I don't know what these other things are. I can't find them in a scientific laboratory if biologists, chemists, physicists don't talk about them. There's no patterning of them. What is their structure? Do they form? Do they
Well, I
form
don't
an
know why you're
algebra?
confusing epistemology with ontology. Like it's pretty basic to know that literally doesn't matter whether you can see it or not.
Well,
Like
no, exactly. Is
if
that's
you have if you have an experience of a color, a
I don't
sound,
I
a
don't have
shape,
experiences.
if you see
I don't know
things,
what
if
that
you hear
means.
things, if you touch things, if you have any
I touch coffee
thing,
cups. I'm
that's an
touching a coffee
experience.
cup.
Congratulations, you have an
No, this is a
experience.
coffee
That's
cup.
an experience. You touched it, that's an experience. The word experience refers to you
No, I,
touching
I
that.
touched it as a physical action. The coffee cup
That's
is a
great.
physical
That's
thing.
great. That's an experience. That's all you
No, it's a
need.
coffee cup.
I don't know what problem you're having here. This is like super basic. Like if you have experiences, if you touch or
I
see or
don't have
taste or things,
experiences.
then you don't
I
exist.
don't have
Then
experiences.
you don't exist.
I do exist. My body exists. It's verifiable. It's scientifically detectable. It has a mass, which unfortunately grows every day. I have a brain. There are
Like if
electrical
this is a
patterns.
disadvantage. If you can't grant that you have experience, then you've lost every possible debate with every theist ever. You're done. Your worldview is so bad you can't even discuss it with them because you can't admit that you exist. That's a problem.
I do exist.
No, you have experience. My apologies.
Here's my body.
I said you experience, so I misspoke when I said exist. I
Yeah,
meant experience. If you can't admit that you have experience, your worldview has a massive problem that makes it completely irrelevant to any theistic debate. You're not going to win if you can't admit you have experience. Like that's a problem. Like if you want to
no,
say
I'm
morality,
not
that's
sure
great.
about that. I mean, I talk with theists a lot. I mean, it's not clear that God has experiences, for instance. In fact, there are quite a few theists who would say that, God has no experience whatsoever. And the ego is, only the ego burns in hell. That's an old Christian saying,
What
right?
I don't
And so
not
the
following.
illusion, right, in mystical experience is the loss of the ego. The ego dissolves and disappears. It dissolves into an egoless ground of being, pure bliss, pure consciousness, pure ego.
Those are all
Ego is
experiences.
sin. Ego is the result of the fall. Theists will be more than happy to talk with me about this. In fact, right, as soon as you get into that, theists are going to find theists generally, because there's a whole long tradition of Christian mysticism. There's a long tradition of views of God as transcending mentality, right? God is super essential. God is beyond mind. And so experience was experience. Your view is a self-centered view. And so
Yes.
that's the fall. Your view that you have an ego, that you have these qualia, is consequence of a fallen mind that no longer sees the world as God originally intended. I mean, I talk with theists about this kind of stuff all the time, and this is textbook Christianity, right? That the
I don't
ego,
understand anything you're saying right now. Ego is just gibberish. It makes no sense to me. Like direct experience, pretty much everybody understands that. Like if you don't have direct experience, there's no souls, there's no afterlife, there's no Jesus. Like, nope. So all of
not at
Christianity is gone
all.
if there's no
I mean,
experience.
my
Because
soul is the form of my body. My body has a structure. It's objectively real. That's what my soul is. The afterlife simply means that this, I mean, I don't like that kind of talk, but the afterlife simply means that that pattern will be reinstantiated in another way. And you don't find any of this language in either the New Testament or the church fathers. You don't even find, you start to find it in Augustine a little bit, but you certainly won't find it in Aquinas. Um, you will start, okay, we get Descartes. Where Descartes comes from, that's a real weird question because nobody knows. Um, but that kind of consciousness mystification, right? And certainly some theists will do that, right? But right, you're right to point exactly, very sharp on these issues, right? Because that's, yeah, I deny that I have direct experiences. I do not have any. I have none. I have no experiences.
Okay, that's
And
very, yeah, that seems like a massive problem. Like I think direct experience, I think consciousness, quality experience is something that's literally physical in the brain somewhere, and we're going to be able to measure it and
oh,
find it in the
I
future.
have electrical patterns of electrical activity in my brain.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean, like literally the thing that dualists and panpsychists and idealists are talking about when they're talking about consciousness. I think that thing is going to be discoverable in a lab somewhere, and we're going to be able to like actually directly experience direct experience at some point. But
sure. You could be right. You could be completely, I could be wrong about all this. That's, I've been wrong about more stuff than I've been right about.
but the
Um,
composition of the direct experience is independent of my argument. Like I don't care what it's made of. It doesn't make a difference.
yeah,
All I
sure.
need
Fine.
is
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, but at that point, it would seem to me, I don't know if one would become a panpsychist or one would just become an idealist.
oh, this is just for epistemic or solipsism, where it's just the starting point is the first thing you have access to is direct experience, whatever that is. Don't know what it's made of, no idea. Could just be stuff in the brain, and that's fine. But the first thing you have access to is the direct experience, and so you can say
Who's
that
the you? Wait,
exists.
who's the you and what's access?
You are the direct experience. It's the same thing. It's
I
like
am
there is a
I'm a
rock,
body.
which
You're
direct
saying
experience
that
is
this
again,
body is
it's
direct
yes.
experience?
Yeah, direct experience is literally a
No,
thing in your
my
brain. It's a
body is a
physical part of
material
your brain.
thing. My
So
body
so is
occupies.
experience is again a thing in the brain. It is a physical thing in the brain somewhere.
Well,
So
then it's
it's
just a
also
physical thing in the brain. It doesn't have
right.
all these other mysterious properties.
I didn't list any other properties.
Well, you say things like qualia. I don't see qualia in any
It's,
physical theory. I've never seen a physicist talk about qualia.
what
Physicists talk about electrons and mass and
right.
charge,
Yes.
and biochemists or psychiatrists talk
So
about
in this
serotonin.
theory, qualia would refer to all of those things that are the consciousness. So qualia would be the collection of all of those things that result or are consciousness. We
Well,
don't
then
know
why
what
not
that is
just
yet
use physical language? I mean, if it's all physical, if it's
because we
just
don't know what it
identical with
is yet.
physical stuff, why not just say it's, look, I mean, I take THC and I feel it binding to my CB1 receptors. I don't know what qualia, I don't know
Because it
what,
begs the question to assume what the qualia is. We don't know what it is. Like if I can't start with its
I
physical.
agree. I agree.
So
We
if I'm
don't
if
know
I'm
what it
starting
is.
with my direct experience, I have no idea what it is yet. I need a word for that direct experience. Let's use qualia. Qualia is a great word. We just pick any random word to refer to the experience, and then I can use this word to refer to it, whatever it's made of. I don't know what it's made of. I don't need to say anything about what it's
It's,
made of.
it's fascinating to me. You are a hyper Platonist about the mind.
Well, it's not a platonic object. It's a literally
Sure it is. It's
experience.
not observable physically.
That well, it is. It is. Well, will
Well,
be in
then
the
why talk
future
about qualia? Why not just talk about serotonin and,
because the way
5-HT2A
epistemology works, if
receptors?
it's like if I start with the soul, let's say it's a soul, well, that's begging the question. That's why Descartes' version of
I didn't say anything
cogito
about
didn't
souls
work.
here.
No, no, yes, you are. Yes, you are. That's the problem, is that if you assert to already know what it's made of, you're begging
I
the
don't know.
question.
It's made of my body. It's flesh. It's
That's
atoms
begging
and
the question.
molecules.
That's the part where the argument fails. Doing that means the argument fails. You can't
Right.
ever do
So
that.
you're a Platonist about the mind.
No, because that's again assuming what it is. I have not in any way assumed it's a platonic object. I don't. It's a thing that's there. I don't know what it's made of. I don't know if it's a
No,
platonic
you got to
object, a physical
understand
object.
what Platonism is, right? Don't confuse it with a first order position about stuff.
Okay, what
Platonism
do you
isn't
mean?
about stuff.
What do you mean by
Platonism is
Platonism
about
in this context?
structure. Platonism is about structure. It's about form, right? And it's about how you conceive of the objects that you're talking about. It's not about what things are made of. Numbers aren't made of stuff. There's no mathematical stuff that numbers are made of. To talk about numbers is to talk about positions in a certain type of pattern. Is to talk about a certain patterning or structuring, right, that you are now applying. And so this is not, in a certain sense, I don't object to this. You just got to see what you're doing. Because if you're not talking about actual physical things that can be lifted and measured in a lab, right? When you start talking about direct experiences, you're talking about objects in a Platonic way. You're
What do you mean?
talking
Because
about
what do you mean by Platonic here? Because I understand Platonic to be outside of space and time, non-physical, non-mental objects. So I would not in any way be talking about that. So I don't know what you mean by
is your when you do the cogito, is your thinking self, is that in space or time?
yes. I think it is, and it's
I'm sorry,
physical.
you don't you I'm sorry, that's a presupposition. You just said you could be in the matrix, you could be
Right. That's
you
why
could be
that's why I don't
totally,
include that in the argument.
so it's
That's why
not in
it's not
space and
there.
time.
Oh my God. The fact that I don't include it in the argument doesn't mean I don't believe it's not in space and time. No, that is not entailed. If I don't include it in the argument, that doesn't mean it is or is not. It does not state a position one way or the other. But later in the argument, I think it is in space and time, but I haven't presented that in the argument either way.
That's
So simply
correct.
saying,
But
me
but
simply saying qualia does not
at
mean
the
it's not
start,
space and time.
at the start there's no space and time.
At the start of the argument, there's no space and time,
Correct.
which
So
is
you are
irrelevant to whether or not there
dealing,
actually is there. So
right.
you can't say there is no space and time if I haven't put it into the argument. No, that's not how it works.
No, I don't say there's no space and time. What I'm saying is when you start this kind of argument, you are working only with words, you are working only with thoughts, and all you're observing in this strange sense of observe, because it's actually not observation, but all you're quasi observing is patterns among objects which you can give no reference to. You can't say what they're made of. You can't say where or when they are. All you can do is understand Platonism is a relational way of thinking. And
What
all you
patterns?
have now is a purely relational approach to your own mind. In fact, you think you have a relation with your own mind that justifies the existence of an object without argument.
What patterns? Because I'm not like if I was an ant and had no cognitive capabilities whatsoever, and I have experience, I'd still exist. So there's no what pattern there.
Well, I'm trying to figure out where you're coming from with all this direct experience talk and with this cogito, Descartes cogito talk and belief in qualia that nobody can observe. I mean, that seems, even as a Platonist, that seems okay. These are just purely relational objects of some kind. You can't find them in a laboratory. Scientists don't find them. They're not mentioned in
We
psychology.
will literally find it in the laboratory.
Well,
But
you're a man of faith. You're a man of great
that's great.
faith.
But so let's say we do. Your argument has been debunked. We found it in a laboratory. It now
No,
exists.
no, it would just be, no, no, no. I'm not saying that you're wrong about saying these kinds of things exist or not. That's not my claim. My claim is you are doing a purely relational kind of thinking when you talk about your own mind this way. You are doing nothing but discussing relationships which you
What's the
find
relation?
within pure thought. Well, obviously, you have a
Fine.
relation with yourself because you say you can observe yourself.
I'm not sure what the relation there is other than A equals A.
Well, no, it can't be A equals A because if we're just A equals A, you wouldn't be able to be both subject and object. You are a subject who observes your own mind. And so there must be a distinction.
What?
Otherwise, there would be, and that's all to go back to theism, right? That's exactly why people will say
Wait,
that God
I
has
can
no
be a
ego.
subject and an object at the same time. All subjects are in fact objects. I'm not sure. That's still
So
A equals
you
A.
so you have a self relation.
Well, the relation is in reality. I don't understand what that means. Like every subject is an object in reality. I don't understand why that's not A
That's
equals A.
fine. That's fine. But so there's a subject, there's an object, and there's some direct experience. Is that a third thing?
No, that's the same thing. That is the subjective experience, which is also the object. Those are all the same thing. All
Are
A
there
equals A.
differences between the
No,
subject and the object?
no, those are all the same thing. The subjective experience is an object that exists in reality, and there's no difference between those two things. It's the same thing.
So the subjective experience stands in a relation of observing to itself. And
I
the
don't know what
relation
that
of
means.
observing is identity.
I have no idea what that means.
Well, where do
Like
you get all this? Where do you get all this information?
what information? Like I could say like I don't have any information. My brain is incapable of obtaining information. All it does is
We're
just
not talking
direct
about brains. They
experience.
might not exist, man.
Right, right. So the direct experience exists, and it has no mental capabilities whatsoever. Can do no
So how does it
thinking.
observe itself?
Well, it's not
How
a
is it
mental capability.
possible, if your theory is true, that you're saying these words to me?
How is it possible? What? Why would it not be possible?
Because you're using all kinds of words to
Yes,
describe the subjective experience speaks, it observes itself, it draws distinctions within itself, it finds structure within itself, it can
yes,
give an account of itself, it's
yes.
active, it's not passive. This cannot be identity. This is not the relation of A equals A.
Right. Those are further things that would be further down the argument
Where do they
part. But
come from?
I don't need to answer that. I just need to know that they're there. So, like, the first part is I exist,
Oh,
and
how do you
where
know how do you know that they're there?
well, those things could be fallible. Those could all be Descartes' demon stuff, like the relation stuff. All that could be wrong.
Right. So
But
all
my
you can
existence
get,
can't. My existence can't be wrong. That part can't be. That one
why
can't
can't
be
that be wrong?
because that would mean that I don't have the experience that I'm literally having.
Right. So that's Descartes' argument. If you didn't exist, you wouldn't be able to have the experience.
Right.
Therefore, you exist. That's the cogito. That is pure reason. That is completely independent of any observation, I mean, in the literal sense of
Well, no, no.
observation with
Again,
your
because
senses.
like I said before, the interpretation of the cogito I'm using, those are synonyms. So it's a tautology. It's not an
That's
argument.
fine. That's completely fine. So now we find, right, exactly the move. I mean, see, in your view, which is a view that, again, I'm on a certain ground, I don't object to at all. But what you're just describing to me is that you, with your mind, took the position of the Platonic one. And you have now described to me the unfolding of the one into many. I don't care if you talk about that in terms of physics, in terms of mentality, in terms of self-observation. The logical pattern of your reasoning is exactly the same. The pattern of reasoning in the cogito is exactly the same as the pattern of reasoning in Plato's Parmenides, the dialectic of the one. It's exactly the same in the pattern of reasoning that Plotinus uses to go from his version of the one to the divine mind. Of course it is. I mean, that's exactly why the divine mind comes next in
But I
Neoplatonism.
think what I'm saying is you don't need any of the reasoning. You can have just direct experience with no reasoning, no thoughts, no
And yet
processing,
you're
no.
talking about it.
Yes, I'm doing it. You can have both too,
How?
but because I have both, but I don't need both for the argument. So like they're
But
separate.
your cogito, you are just making a rational argument that's
No,
going
no,
from
I'm not.
a
I
hidden
think that's what
one.
you're misunderstanding here. So if there is a direct experience, that is an object. It's not an argument. There's no rationality there. There's a direct experience. It exists. It is a thing that
That's
exists.
fine.
And then
That's
if
perfectly
it
fine.
exists, it can't not exist. And I don't need the thing
Yeah, that's the
itself doesn't
counterfactual.
wait,
That's a counterfactual property.
right, right, but the direct experience
Okay,
doesn't
so
need
we
to
have a
do
thing
any of the
that exists.
rationality.
We have
So
a thing
so
that exists, which is your direct experience.
right.
And now you're telling me that it has certain counterfactual properties, which must be distinct from what it is. Because it
Wait,
can't have properties that are about its own possible non-existence.
those would be properties of reality, not properties of
Oh, I
the
agree. That's fine. That's
experience.
not the issue here. It's not
Right.
the issue. We can grant that what you say, that direct experience exists.
Yes.
And now somehow this direct experience is able to talk about itself.
Well, that we can keep that part out. Say it can't. Say it just
Well,
has
then
direct experience.
mysticism is just silence. I
What?
mean,
That doesn't make sense.
and this is fine. You are repeating the dialectic of Platonic mysticism.
Wait. How? So an experience exists. It is in space. It is in time. It can't
We
talk.
didn't say anything about space or time.
Well, Platonic
No-
objects typically, as I understand it, means an object that's not in space or time, that's not
Well,
physical, not
your
mental.
direct experience isn't in space or time.
I'm saying it is. So there's a direct experience. It's there. It's in space and time. It's not
No,
physical. It's
you don't know that. By
What
your
do you
own
mean?
admission, you don't know that it's in space or time. Space or
This
time, you might
is
be in the matrix. You might be, you might be a pure soul that there's no space and time at all. You have no idea from pure experience, from direct
so
experience.
literally irrelevant here to the argument. So all I need is a conditional. It doesn't need to be a necessary. It just needs sufficient condition. So here's a
Very
sufficient
good.
condition. There is a space and
Right.
time, and there is a
And
conscious
now we've
experience in
got
that space and
logic.
time. No. We can say no. Just this is a
Sufficient
possibility.
necessary conditions.
No, this is just me describing something from an outside perspective of a
Well,
case, which is
how did you
irrelevant
get an outside perspective?
because I have a brain that does those, which is irrelevant to the argument.
So you have, I thought we were starting from direct experience.
Right. So there's a direct experience. This is a
So what can you
hypothetical.
derive from
No,
that?
this is just a hypothetical. This is irrelevant to the argument here. It's hypothetical. Hypothetical case. There is a direct experience. It is in space and time. It can't talk.
I don't believe in space and time. I need an argument that those exist.
What?
If you want to start with direct experience and you're serious about that, and you want to start with something like the cogito, which is a perfectly reasonable argument, right? You are going to be retracing in psychological language. I mean, look, this is about patterns.
Well, I think you're conflating two
the same
arguments here.
pattern of thought, right? This is the observation people made that's, generally referred to as structuralism. It's an old observation.
Well, just to clarify, I think you're conflating the two different arguments.
But the structure of your reasoning is just the same as Plato's and the Parmenides.
No, it's not. You're conflating two. You're wrong. You are wrong. You are conflating two.
I think I've lost your audio.
Oh, you lost my audio. I can hear you fine. Can you guys in the chat hear me?
I can't. Wait. Your audio is gone, man.
Testing.
There's back.
You can hear me now? Testing?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah. Good.
So yeah, I think you're conflating. I was making two different arguments here that are not the same argument. They're unrelated. One is me trying to explain to you the general concept of qualia, which is me just trying to give you an example. So here's a space and time. There is a direct experience there. It is in space and time. So this has nothing to do with the cogito and just starting with epistemic experience. This is just me explaining to you, trying to get you to grant the qualia that pretty much every human being accepts, like 99.99%. And if you don't,
well, I don't care how many people accept it.
Well, the reason that's important is because if you have to reject something that's so obvious and accepted by so many people, that makes your worldview significantly less plausible, significantly less compelling to pretty much everybody. If you have to reject something like, or if you had to say the world was flat in your ideology, people would just laugh at you. And so it is.
Well, I can say that you have all this stuff, direct experience and qualia, but I just say they're illusions. I don't deny that. I mean,
that would be like
there's
saying
lots
the world
of
is
illusions.
Flat. So saying you have a direct experience, but it's an illusion, is equivalent to saying the world is flat.
No. I mean, I can tell you I do all this. I just go do science now. I just go and do math. Right.
From the perspective of the vast majority of people, if there's something that's so obviously true to them and you have to reject that, it makes your position seem ridiculous, like a reductio ad absurdum kind of a thing. And so if you have to say,
I don't think that the vast majority of people, right? I mean, and it is interesting. There are some surveys, there's some empirical data here, right? I'm not sure that the vast majority of people have a very coherent theory of mind, of their own minds to begin with.
I agree. I 100% agree with you, but they are under the impression that direct experience, those words refer to their experience of the world around them, and their thoughts and the things that they're experiencing.
Oh, but I say things like I say things like, this is a blue coffee cup. I see that it's blue. I'm looking at a coffee cup. So I didn't have to add any of this other theory to that.
Right. But again, so I'm contrasting your uses of language here when you say that experience is an illusion. And if I contrast how other people understand that statement, it makes you seem as ridiculous as someone saying the world is flat, or more ridiculous, probably. And so based on the way that people understand those terms, my experience is an illusion is a contradiction. Can't be the case.
Well, I don't think that that's true at all. I mean, people understand immediately the effects of drugs on their brains and that they have illusions of moods. People, in fact, right, have generally report, you read Oliver Sacks on this, right? People commonly hallucinate. People have,
I totally agree.
tinnitus. I have tinnitus, and I know that's an illusion.
Well, I
There's
totally agree. So
no
I agree that the experience you're having can be not an accurate representation of reality, but it can't be an illusion in the fact that it doesn't exist. That part can't be illusory. That would be a contradiction. That would be A does not equal A.
I'm not sure what that means. It can't be an illusion in the sense that it doesn't exist. In fact, I would say that, um, what does it mean to say my tinnitus exists? That
Your
seems to me to be a
experience.
very strange kind of existence claim. What is it that exists? If I want to say that certain electrical activity in my cochlear, neural circuits, that exists, yeah, sure, you can measure that in a laboratory. You can put my head under an fMRI scanner. You can literally, in the correct sense of observe, you can observe that. But to say that it exists and it's something else, I don't know what that means.
Well, that's
That I
fine,
would
but
say is
again,
an illusion.
from the vast majority of people's perspective, their direct experience exists. It is an object in reality that is independent of opinion. It's not abstract. It's not
No, I
platonic.
don't
It
I
is
don't
a
think most
thing.
people think about that. And I do think that when they do think about that, clearly, for instance, Buddhism is popular. People realize psychedelics, of course, are popular. They're gaining popularity. People realize that their mental life might be a vast illusion constructed by the brain. Sam Harris's book Waking Up was a
I think
bestseller. I mean,
you keep bringing up the things you're experiencing, but not addressing the experience itself. Like, I don't
because
care
there's
if
no
this.
such thing.
Well, this is the point. So most people think there is. Like, everybody thinks there is,
Well,
pretty
that's an
much.
empirical claim, and I
Yep.
just gave you empirical evidence that it's false.
I don't know because I've spoken to Buddhists. I have quite a bit of experience talking to people. I have 700 something videos on here, and with the
Sure.
exception of three, they all grant this. So I have a large pool of data of Buddhists too, who all grant this. Every one of the
Well,
Buddhists
no
I've
one
talked to.
doubts that. I don't doubt that you have direct experience. I just say that it's an illusion. What I mean by that, and this is illusionism, right, in philosophy of mind, like Keith Frankish and Dan
Yes,
Dennett.
I'm familiar.
We don't say that
Well,
consciousness doesn't exist. We just say that your theory of it is wrong. You have an illusory attribution of existence at all kinds of places. You're caught up in a belief about the self,
so
right? The
I've
self
spoken with
isn't the
Dan
thing you
Dennett.
think it is.
So I've spoken with Dan Dennett, and in his position, now his position is that our conception of consciousness has a bunch of entailments which are false. But the
Right.
minimum conception that you have direct experience, he grants that one. He's willing to say, "Yup, you have that." Now, of course, it could be wrong. We don't know what it means. We don't know what it's made of. I agree with all of that. I didn't say any of that. All I said is it exists. That's it. And he's happy to
Right.
grant that one.
Yeah, but sure, so am I. I'm just not happy to grant all the entailments that you derive
Well,
from it.
so by exist, I mean opposite of illusion, not an illusion.
No, I don't think that that's what. Look, I mean, so my tinnitus is an illusion. That doesn't mean that my tinnitus doesn't exist. It just means things like it has no reference to an external source of sound,
Right.
right? When I say it's an illusion, I don't mean that it doesn't exist.
Right.
Okay, but I am clear about what its existence is. Its existence is misfiring neurons in a circuit in my, the auditory part of my brain. I know
So
exactly
what
what I mean when I say it exists. And I know exactly what I mean when I say it's an illusion. It doesn't refer to anything in the outside world, right? But there are also stranger illusions in the mind.
Well, again, I know about all the illusions. I'm very familiar. I
Sure,
don't like my whole argument says we could be a brain in the vat. Everything you experience could be an illusion, but your experience existing can't because that's not an experience. That's not
cool.
an opinion you
So
have.
now you're a Platonist.
No, because I still haven't stated what that is. It's if I later
Platonism
discover,
doesn't make any existence claims.
well, again, you're
Platonism says that the structure of reality
if
is
I
purely
discover the
relational.
experience is in space and time, that debunks Platonism,
No,
and that's a
because Platonism
possibility.
says that space and time are geometrical structures.
Well, no. So the point here is that I can posit my existence is there, and I can then say, here's a way to refute Platonism, and that's still a possibility. Therefore, I'm not a Platonist.
That
So
would
it,
refute Platonic dualism, and that would be correct, right? That's a not defensible view of Platonism to think that there are two orders of existence, one material and one mathematical. That and no historical Platonist would have ever said that. I mean, Platonists are monists. Everything comes from the one.
Right. So I
There's
could be a
not
dualist.
two.
I could say there's a conscious entity, and there could also be this other stuff of magical flying potatoes or whatever, and I could believe both. And so I'm
Magical flying
not a
potatoes.
Platonist. So the point here is that I can posit this conscious entity and not be a Platonist, because I could have other theories and stuff too that are disagree with Platonism. So just positing the existence of my consciousness does not make me a Platonist at all. It's just there's
Except
consciousness.
that, look, Platonism is a commitment to the view that reality is a purely relational structure. And that's what you're doing with all this qualia talk, all this direct
No, I'm
experience
not.
talk. All you've talked about are relations among entities.
Right, but I can use relations as like words. They're maps onto a territory. They are not the territory.
Well,
So I
then
don't
you are
think
a
pure relations exist.
self-thinking map. You are a map of
Self,
your own territory.
sure, but that doesn't tell me what the territory is. I've made no claims about the
Well, the
territory.
territory is the map.
No, it's not. That's
Subject is
literally a
the
fallacy.
object.
That's literally
Subject
the
is the object.
so there's this fallacy called confusing the map and the territory. They're not the same thing.
No, and first of all, that map territory thing, that's self-refuting in the first place, because do you need now a map of the map? How do you know the map is a map of the territory? Do you need a map that tells you where the map is in respect to the territory? But on your view, you said the
What?
subject and object are identical. Subject of thinking is identical to the object of thought. And so the object of thought, if that's the territory and the subject is the map and the territory are identical. The map is a map of itself.
Well, no, your subjective thinking. You're not thinking about your own existence.
What are you
That's
thinking about?
You could be thinking about anything. Potatoes. I don't care.
Well, you think, but when you have direct experience, you're thinking about yourself.
Okay. So yes, you're thinking about yourself.
So the map
Isn't
thinks
yourself.
about the map. But you're thinking
No.
about yourself as not yourself?
Yourself is the object. And so if you're thinking about yourself,
Well, you
your
just
thinking
said
about yourself
5
is
minutes
not.
ago, subject and object are identical.
Yes. If you have subjective experience and that is an object. So your thought of a unicorn is an object in reality. It's an object. All subjects are objects.
All subjects are objects, all maps are territories.
If you want to say that the map is a territory of the map, sure, but that's not.
Nice. So now we're into all the problems of reflexivity, and this is pure, but that's
There's no
fine.
problem there.
You are
What's the
doing
problem there?
purely relational thinking, and it's beautiful and it's great, and it shows the power of the rational mind. And so you are just a Platonist about mentality,
No, because
which is a
again,
common.
nothing I said there entails Platonism. The fact that I can use relations as a language does not mean I believe those relations
But then
exist.
I think that you don't believe those relations exist.
No,
Then why would you believe you have direct experience?
because it's a thing that is there. It's an object that exists. There's no relation. It
They're
exists
they're in relation to no one.
in relation to no one. There's no relation. It exists. That's the only statement. There's no relational statement there.
Who's making that statement?
Who's making the statement? No one is making the statement. The statement is irrelevant here. There is an object that exists in reality. I can make a statement to describe it, but the statement is irrelevant. You can just get rid of the statement. The object will still exist with or without the statement.
But the object, so there's this object that exists
Yeah.
in a certain purity of isolation.
I don't know what that means. Yes.
Well, it's not in relation to anything. I mean, the statement is something we can throw away. Its entailment of its own existence is an argument that's not been made yet. This object, it exists. It exists in pure solitude.
As far as we know, yes. There's no other claims about what else exists.
You are talking about the Platonic one.
No,
That is
because there's
exactly what you are talking about.
no, because again, there's no entailments of what this thing is or what it's made of. It could be made of other things. There could
Platonists
be
make
many.
no such entailments.
Again, there's no entailment of Platonism here. There is an object that
No,
exists.
that is Platonism.
How is that Platonism? How is saying an object exists Platonism?
The way you are talking about this argument, this object, is exactly the same way that the Platonists talk about the one. It's the same object.
We're also using the same language in English. It doesn't mean English is entailed in the fundamental nature of reality.
Oh yeah, this has nothing to do with any the words, as you yourself correctly said, the words have nothing to do with any of this. But
Right. And so
what the
you just
way
made my own
you're
argument. So
but the
you
way
saying
you
that
are
I'm
talking is exactly, in other words, why do you think that what you're talking, what might ask you this question, why do you think it's not the one?
what do I think? Or I didn't say it is or isn't. There are zero entailments one way or the other,
Exactly. And
which
this
means it can't be
isolation,
Platonism
why can't it?
because it
That's
could be one
exactly
way or
what
the other.
exactly what, but the Platonists don't care what you think this object is. They never have. I mean, you could add a whole bunch of theory, right? Which is exactly what the theists did. They said, "Oh, it's God," right? What you've discovered here is your own, God consciousness or something like that. No, there's no reason to do that. There's absolutely no reason to do that. You've grasped the pure relational structure of the mind, and in doing so, as every Platonist will tell you, the Plotinus works it out in detail. By doing that, you have grasped the one. You've grasped your own pure unity in a way that's prior to any dialectic, it's prior to any words, it's prior to any reasoning, prior even to direct experience, because it's unified with itself.
Is that rock a
And
Platonist?
is that
There's,
what?
there's a rock. There's a rock on the table. Is that rock a Platonist?
I don't know what that means. I mean, rocks, as far as I know, don't have thoughts.
Yeah, but
So
they exist just fine. So there, the rock exists. Is it a Platonist now?
I don't think the rock is going to say all these words to me.
Right. I don't
If
care
it
about the words.
started,
The consciousness doesn't say any of the words. The consciousness exists in the exact same way
well,
the
do you,
rock
do you
does. It's
think the
there.
rock, the consciousness, so do you think the rock is conscious?
Nope.
But then it doesn't exist in the same way the rock
No, they
exists.
both exist. Like a TV exists and a camera exists. They both exist in the exact same way.
Well, but then if the existence is, I mean, all these things
Well,
exist in the same way, and the one is conscious and the other is not, that's a contradiction, because then they
no, it's
exist in
not.
different
A
ways.
TV and a camera exist in the same way, even though one's a TV and one's a camera. The fact that they can be different objects and still exist in the same way, as in within reality, does not is
Okay,
not a
so you're
contradiction. But
talking
but the
about
point here,
well, you're talking about pure existence.
yes,
You're talking about the one
no,
being
it doesn't make
itself.
sense. So
Being
again,
itself. You're talking about, no, you've inherited from
is the rock a
people I
Platonist?
don't know who have given you all this crazy talk about Platonism that doesn't have anything to do with anything any historical Platonist ever said. It's
Like,
some ideology that comes from I don't know where, some textbook or something. But you want to start to talk about pure existence, you're talking about being itself, you're talking about the one.
is
Now you
okay?
can
The rock
import a whole lot of
exists. Is
ideology,
the
which
rock a
is,
Platonist?
I don't know what that means. I mean, to be a humans are Platonists.
So if I said an
Maybe some
object
birds are
exists,
Platonists.
the fact that the object exists doesn't make it a Platonist.
No, why would it?
Okay, so if
Platonism
I
is
say
a
a consciousness exists, it's over there, it's right next to the rock. Is the consciousness a Platonist?
consciousness exists. That's a statement I have a real hard time understanding.
So there's a rock that exists, it's not a
Yeah.
Platonist. And there's a consciousness that exists next to the rock. I don't know what it's made of, I don't know how it works, don't care, it's there. It's also not a Platonist. Simply
No,
saying it
there's no
exists,
consciousness that exists.
again, that's just like self-implodes your entire position. That's worse than saying
No, it
there's no
doesn't at
morality.
all. I think all sorts of things exist. Consciousness is not one of them.
Like if the whole benefit of Platonism is that you get some kind of advantage, like for example, talking to theists and saying you have morality. And then one of the consequences is when you're talking to theists, you can't admit consciousness exists. That's like,
Yeah, actually, theists like that.
no, they don't. They do not. This is my
Sure they
literal
do.
profession is talking with them all day,
Well,
every day.
it's true. I mean, I don't talk with, let's say, your average church going
No, like I
person
talk
very
with
much.
academic professors every day. And there's hundreds of videos on my channel doing this. Of that's
Sure,
literally my job. They do
sure,
not. Like they think
sure.
it's silly. If you say consciousness doesn't exist, they laugh at you. That they all
And
laugh
yet,
at
I
you. Like
think
there is a running joke
if
about
I said God transcends consciousness, I believe every single theist in the world who's thought about theism would agree with me.
yes,
God
but that
is
has
not
absolutely nothing
conscious.
to do with saying consciousness doesn't exist. Like every like
No, no. I
I've
mean,
literally
no.
had conversations with
I
many theists
agree.
on this topic. They say it's a joke. The people, the Dan Dennett style of people who say conscious doesn't exist is such a joke that I can't
Well,
take them
they usually
seriously.
misunderstand that. What I mean when I say consciousness doesn't exist, I don't mean that there are no things that are conscious. I never said that. But
Well,
consciousness is not the kind of thing that gets existence put after it. I
yeah,
mean,
it is for like
so
most people. That is.
I think for a lot of, I'll certainly agree with you. I think for a lot of people who have bought into a kind of late stage American Anglophone theism, or because what happened in a lot of cases was, God became psychologized. And so humanism tells you that, oh, what used to be the soul is just the brain, what used to be God is just humanity. And how do we understand this? We make consciousness into a grand mystery. The mystery of God now becomes the mystery of consciousness. There's plenty of people who've talked about this. I mean, this is a well trodden path. And so, yeah, am I conscious right now? Of course I am. That just means I'm awake. Do I believe in the mystery of consciousness, capital C, capital M? No, I don't. Consciousness is a property of a brain, or maybe a neural network in a computer. That's fine. The illusion isn't that. The illusion is this ideology that's built up around consciousness. The illusion is that when you use the word qualia, you think you're referring to something, and you're not. And if you say, oh, qualia are just brain states, fine, then just talk about brain states, right? So,
That's referring to something.
yes, correct. It is. Brain states
So
exist,
so
they're
saying quality
real.
does refer to something.
Well, I mean, I think you've said a lot of things about this topic, but it's very interesting to me, right? Because Platonism is about abstraction, abstract from the content, look at the form of the discourse. And when you talk about, this pure subjectivity or pure existence, you're talking about the one. And yes, we can now have. I'm going to agree, right? You're absolutely right to say the vast majority of theists, they think God's an old man up in the sky. He has a mind that works just like my mind or your mind. If you find anybody who's serious about these issues, they will say that immediately that's idolatry. That's idolatry. That's confusing God with Zeus, and God is not that.
Yeah, but they're all going to say they're
And
conscious. They admit they're conscious. Who
I'm
cares about God?
conscious. I'm conscious.
And it's not an illusion, and it does literally exist, and it is quality experience, and they are going to agree to
No,
every
that's
single
all
one of those.
illusion. That's all illusion.
Right, and that's the problem because
That's
they're all going to agree to
ideology.
every single one of those.
I don't really, I mean, that would be interesting, right? And then that would suggest, to my way of thinking sociologically, that's kind of an influence of evangelicalism, evangelical Protestantism, right? Which has a very and the person to read about this is Tanya Lerman,
Well,
right? That
I don't think that quite follows because this also applies because I've talked to many Hindus and many Buddhists and many people in China and all over the world, Malaysia. I've had interviews with all of these
sure
people. They all agree on this one. This one's like pretty much everybody agrees on, no matter what your worldview is, with a very tiny exception.
agrees on what?
Qualia is consciousness. It exists. You experience it.
I don't think many people ever heard that word qualia. I
But if
don't
I
think
just say
they.
it's your direct experience, like, oh yeah, yep, that exists. Yep.
Well, I don't deny that I have direct experience. I just don't have this whole theory about them that you have.
I don't
When
have
I
a
say
theory.
I
I'm
have
just
a
saying
direct
it exists.
experience, I told you that. I say I look at the coffee cup, I see that it's blue. It looks kind of black. But no one denies that. No one denies that
That's
at
all
all.
qualia means. You have a direct experience. That's it. That's
No, that's
literally the
not what
full
qualia
extent.
means.
Yes, it is.
Qualia gets caught up now into a big theory. And the next thing
No.
you know, you're talking about the hard problem of consciousness. I know this guy. And the next thing you know, you're with Goff and you're talking about panpsychism. I know where all this goes.
Well, I don't.
And
I'm a materialist. I don't think any of that follows. I can still use the word qualia just fine because it just means internal subjective experience. That's it. I think it's all physical. I think it's
if you
literally a
just
thing in the
mean
brain.
brain states, you should talk about brain states.
Well, I mean, whatever is causing the direct experience, which I happen to believe is brain states, but that's irrelevant to the argument. So you don't need that part. But
Well, I think the more interesting question, at least for me, is how people conceptualize God, and do they conceptualize God in this consciousness way, right? And I think that the answer is you're correct. You're right. I think that the influence of Protestantism, particularly evangelical Protestantism, which is a novel and historically deviant form of Christianity. And it's deviant in its prayer practices. And by deviant, I don't mean negative. I don't mean to be, I mean just that anthropologically or sociologically. It's new, it's non-traditional, presents itself as traditional, it's highly non-traditional, it's a departure. The kinds of prayer practices that are done in evangelical Protestantism, which end up attributing a kind of pure consciousness to God or thinking of God that way. Traditionally, Christians would have said this is idolatry. And yeah, it is interesting that you might be pointing to something really, really true and really interesting, which is, yeah, evangelicalism has this very powerful psychological technology, right? And it gets under the skin, and people fall into this. That I wouldn't deny, right? That people fall into an illusory way of thinking about things, right? That it's the correct way, that I would deny. But I would think that if you were a Catholic or an Eastern Orthodox person who really, reflected on their theology and was informed about their theology, right? And just instead of just saying whatever they thought came to mind, right? One would reject all those kinds of claims about God, right? Certainly in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, you would not say something like God is conscious or has conscious experience or direct experience, anything like that. I mean, that's an error. That's the error of anthropomorphism, right? And if you're a Catholic and you think that God is the pure act of being, then you sure don't think it has consciousness. In fact, the whole history of Catholic mysticism, right, is a refutation of that. And but then you get to Protestantism, and yeah, you get something different. That I think would be, that I think is an interesting thing to pursue, right? How
Well, didn't
and
the
that I think
whole
is also why Platonism is so threatening to Protestants.
well didn't the
They're
whole
not
idea that God wasn't conscious start with like the Thomistic idea of him being pure aseity stuff? That was the
pure
one where it's like,
aseity, right? I mean, once you have these kinds of concepts of God is being itself, pure aseity. Um, you do not have things like consciousness and direct experience and qualia and mentality. You can talk about God that way. That's analogical predication, because as a human, you do that stuff, and the only way you can make contact with God is by speaking of God in a language that makes intelligible sense to you.
but isn't that like a very modern, very esoteric interpretation of God? Like that seems like the very minority view, that God doesn't have consciousness, and that he does is like the vast majority view, and was for most of the time.
I think that in a Protestant context, especially evangelical Protestantism, now about 100 years old, yes, that view in the United States is a majority Protestant country, and even Catholics and atheists are Protestants in the United States.
Well, wouldn't
And
you like Jesus's time? Majority view, probably God was conscious.
I don't know about that. That's because you don't actually have any words for this kind of mental experience at that time. You don't have any words for that stuff until after Augustine. There's no Greek or even Latin way of discussing the content of the mind like that. The first person who talks about things like this is Augustine, and he talks about things like the inner eye, the inner hand, the inner tongue, right? And he constructs the inner man. And this is the first, I mean, even the word consciousness or self-consciousness, that's modern language. You don't even find that kind of terminology appearing until the modern age. Consciousness
Um,
is a modern word.
I'm pretty sure
And
they used the word direct experience all the time in Greek. It was like imperia or something. Like I think they did use that. They just didn't use qualia. They did have direct experience. That was the thing.
well, now you got to be really careful. I mean, what ancient words mean to ancient peoples, you really have to look at how they use those words. And for the ancient Greeks, for sure, the mind is if there's a philosophy of mind that they seem to embrace, it's inactivism. They don't think there's any interiority to their beings. They don't think that there's anything like, oh, something in the mind. That doesn't make any sense. Experiences are outside in the world. And there's no distinction, like you would say, you would like these guys. There's no distinction between the object of experience and the experience because they never drew it. And, there are words for things like being awake, but words for awareness and stuff, I mean, and certainly this whole consciousness language, a lot of that starts with John Locke. I mean, it's like 300 years old. So I mean, yeah, that's fascinating stuff. But there is no Christian concept of God until very late, till the 400s or 500s, right? They don't have a theology until then. And most of it's taken from Neoplatonism anyway. Right? Most of it's taken from Proclus or Damascus, who's probably Pseudo-Dionysus.
Wait,
Right?
I was thinking like most of it came from like Hinduism and Zoroastrianism, and they had a pretty decent concept of a god, I think.
Probably not Buddhism. I mean, the first contact we know there is probably in Plotinus's time, right, where there are some Romans interacting with the Buddhist empires and Indus Valley civilizations. But they're bringing stuff. I mean, Plotinus actually tried to take a trip to India on an imperial expedition, which failed in Persia, so they never made it. But the Romans have heard about this stuff. Hinduism and Buddhism, such as they are, I'd be careful historically about importing them or thinking. A lot of what we know about Hinduism and Buddhism is made up by British missionaries and British colonialists, right? When you go back
we have like texts of the Vedas that are pretty old in the Bhagavad Gita.
Well, you have translations of those texts, right?
Sure.
But translation's a big deal. I mean, we know already that most of the translations of the Bible were extremely inaccurate. Most of the translations of Plato, to bring a good one. I mean, we only are getting accurate translations. There are all kinds of places in the Platonic texts where people inserted the word God. It's not there. All right. God did this. It's not there. Go look at the Greek. And, or you find that the word theon in Greek is never used as a substantive. And so, yeah, I mean, but where this stuff, you raise a really good point as to how Christians think of their God historically and philosophically, right? And I will say this, you might be right about pointing to a trend of an increasing view of consciousness as divine. And that would be philosophically really interesting. Right. So, and that would be interesting if even a Christian theist and an atheist materialist could both agree that consciousness is divine. That would be like an astonishing thing. And I think panpsychism, which in a certain way says consciousness is divine, or idealism, right? If you look at New Age or, you look at psychedelics, people writing about psychedelics, you find a convergence on that thesis. Okay, consciousness is divine, and yeah, maybe you're an atheistic materialist, maybe you're a Christian theist, but we all can agree on this, right?
I probably would not agree that consciousness is divine. I just think it exists. It's a thing. It's
But
no
you
different than a
talk
rock.
about its existence in the way that people talk about divine existence.
I don't know what you mean there. So I think it's an object no different than a rock. It is an object in reality. It's the only object I'm aware of, but it's no different than any other object. It has no.
But it's something that you couldn't be wrong about.
Right, because I am it. I am the thing.
I am it, and I can't be wrong about this. This is the necessity, right? This is the necessary truth, the necessary being.
No, it wouldn't. It would be contingent. Like all of it would be contingent. It just
if it's
happens
contingent,
to be the case.
you could be wrong about it.
No.
Yes.
No.
Because it's contingent, it's dependent on something, and where there's dependency, there can be error.
No, like the fact that if I said there is it is the case that the camera is there, that it's a true statement. It isn't a necessarily true statement, but it's a true
Is it the
statement.
case that your experience is there?
Yes, it is a true statement. It isn't a
Is that a
necessary
net?
statement.
It's
No,
not
like
necessary?
I could
Because
not
you
exist.
just said it was necessary.
No, 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 no. I said it was not necessary. I said it's contingent. So I am a contingent being, so I could not exist, but I do exist. And if I do exist, then it's true that I exist, and that would be necessary because it's A
But
equals
is
A.
when you have that experience, is it a necessary truth that you're having the experience?
Is it a necessary? If I'm having the experience is having the experience. So that would be A equals A. So yes, there'd be a necessary entailment of having the
All right.
experience
A
that it is the
equals A.
experience.
I am I, a
Yeah.
necessary truth. This sounds like God talk to me.
Logic, A equals A. Like my existence would still be contingent, but if my existence exists, it exists. So yeah, if a rock exists, it would be a
Well,
rock.
right. We go out into all these other claims now about space and time and bodies and material brains and things like that. But when we're simply talking about the direct experience, the pure experience, the language suddenly becomes theological.
What saying logic is true isn't theological. Like saying A equals A wouldn't be a theological statement.
But I thought you weren't a Platonist. You don't believe that like A equals A is a
Right.
necessary truth about reality.
It describes reality. I'm a nominalist, but it describes reality. It's
So there's some fact about reality that it describes.
yes, which is
Right, that's a
existence.
necessary truth. And that's exactly what a Platonist will say.
No, like a necessary truth is something that's true in all possible worlds. My existence is not true in all possible worlds.
No, but the A equals A, the conscious experience is, I don't know what, experience of
Itself
itself
is
or,
itself. Yes, A
yeah,
equals A.
yeah. That sounds to me like theology.
Well, I think it's possible to have non-standard logics in some possible worlds too. So I'm
Oh
okay
yeah,
with that. But
I'm happy, but if we're going to go to non-staying like paraconsistent logics, then game over, man. We got a whole different can of worms. That's a whole separate conversation there, right? And a fascinating one too. Right? I'm a great admirer of Grand Priest. So yeah, but I think that look at the ways that Christians would talk, particularly Protestant Christians, evangelical Protestants, talk about God, and the way some people talk about consciousness, and you find a strange convergence. And I find that convergence to be very interesting. And you could be completely right. Yeah, everybody in the world could switch to this position of like, the divinity of consciousness, and we could all sing kumbaya. And there might be a few cranky old men like me and Dan Dennett. I don't have a beard, but I don't have the badass beard. I got long hair. It
well,
could just,
I'm still confused when you say the divinity of consciousness because I'm not consciousness. All consciousness is contingent. No, I'm. Let's grant A equals A is necessary. Laws of logic are necessary, but consciousness all contingent. So I wouldn't be saying that's divine in any way.
but when you are talking about direct experience in the way that you talk about it, as being self identical, as being impossible to deny when you're having it, impossible to be wrong about it when you're having it, what you are talking about, or if you're talking about anything, maybe you're not talking about anything at all, in which case you're an illusionist. But
Well,
if you're
I'd
talking
apply
about,
those things, same things to everything. So a rock, if it exists, can't not be itself. Just like consciousness, if it exists, can't not be itself. And the rock's existence can't be false if it exists. Just
but
like
there's
my
something
experience.
different about consciousness, isn't there?
Um,
Because your consciousness has this capacity to be self-conscious and to say things about itself and to understand that when you are conscious, you are aware of your consciousness. Because wouldn't that be like a complete crazy thing to say, like I'm conscious, but I'm not aware of my consciousness?
no, that's possible.
It's
Like,
possible for you to be conscious, but not conscious of your consciousness.
yeah, that's absolutely possible. That'd be like a computer or something that is the first level of consciousness is where it exists, but it doesn't have self-awareness. It doesn't have any kind of awareness of its own consciousness. But so I would say that is possible on the very early levels of consciousness. But the fact that there are different kinds of machines that can do kinds of things wouldn't make them the principles that describe them would still be the same. So it's still itself, regardless of whether or not it's self-aware. It's still itself, even if it's a rock and has no consciousness whatsoever. And so the principles I'm describing when I describe my consciousness would apply equally as much to a rock as anything else. So if
That
a
would,
rock exists,
yeah, okay,
it would
that's
exist.
interesting that you say that, because then it sounds like the rock is conscious.
No, that would be just a different process of a different combination of stuff. So
But
like
wait, why
that,
isn't the rock conscious if the principles that you apply to your consciousness are the same as the principles that apply to the rock?
because
I mean, this
it's
is
physically
panpsychic. This is where
different.
panpsychists, get off. This is where they say, yeah, see, the rock has to be conscious, exactly because the same principles that you apply to yourself apply to the rock.
Because the only entailments of my argument don't entail consciousness. Like if I exist, then I exist. That applies to the rock. If the rock exists, the rock exists. Whether or not it's conscious is independent of the
Yeah,
argument.
but
So the
you
only
can tell me about your existence. You're talking about
that's
it.
irrelevant to the argument. That's not in the argument. Whether or not I can tell you about it is irrelevant. So if I can't tell you about it, it's still true that if I exist, I
Yes, and
exist.
now you're back to the one. And so,
No,
well, you've got this experience, direct experience that's purely in your mind.
probably, but that wouldn't matter to the argument.
Well, the argument is that when you talk about experience in this way, this direct experience as being purely in your mind, it's purely in itself. Your direct experience is a thing in itself, and it's also a
It's a
thing that's for itself because you're aware of it when you have it. And so there's this, but it's in pure isolation from anything else because, everything else might be the matrix or, an immaterial soul, or you don't know what you are.
right.
And what you are, you're correct. What you are is irrelevant to this argument because right now you are tracing out the logic of the one in complete isolation from all things, completely in itself, yet for
Well, I didn't
itself
say
and
any of
itself.
that. So like, I think you're
But you did
conflating it.
say it.
No, no, I think you're conflating epistemology and ontology. The ontology is I exist. My epistemology means that I
Okay,
don't
you
have any knowledge
exist.
of other
You
stuff.
exist. You exist.
Right. So then making these
And
claims about
and
there's
you
this
exist as what?
no idea. I don't care.
That seems to be a little strange because then if that were the case, I could just say, yeah, you're a materialist, consciousness is an illusion, or you're a
Mm,
theist and God, you're God, maybe you're God. I
well, the
mean,
existence of the object can't be an illusion because it's literally the premise it
so the
exists.
existence of the object cannot be an illusion.
Right.
So this existence somehow has necessity.
No, because again, it
Then
can
it
be a
could be an
contingent object.
illusion.
No, like if the object exists, it must exist. That part's
That's
necessity. A
necessity.
equals A. Well, no, the object isn't necessary. If the object exists, it does exist. A equals A is a
Well, you said the object
necessary.
exists. You said it
Right.
exists.
So the
So
object
that's a simple
exists.
entailment. It exists. If it exists, it must exist. Therefore, it must exist. So its existence is necessary.
No. So if an object like a
Yes, you just said
pineapple,
all
if
those
no,
sentences.
no, if a pineapple exists, the pineapple isn't necessary. It doesn't necessarily exist, but it,
I,
it
I
does
I
exist.
understand, but you just said if I exist, then I must exist. I
No,
mean, maybe
if
you
I
didn't mean to
exist,
say that, but
if I exist, it means I can't not exist at the same time.
if I exist, it means I can't not exist at the same time. Okay, so there's a lot of necessity in that statement.
The
I
law of
can't
logic,
not exist.
non-contradiction.
So I can't not exist means it's not possible for me to not exist, which means it's necessary that I exist.
The law of
If I
non-contradiction.
exist, and this is the second time you've said it, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not trying to disagree with you, but you've said several times now, if I exist, then I exist necessarily.
No, again, there can be an object which is contingent and it does exist, which means it can't not exist at the same time,
I
but it's still a
understand, but we're
contingent
talking about
object.
you. We're
Right.
talking about
I can.
you.
So a contingent object can exist, but it didn't. That means it can't not exist at the same time. But it's still a contingent object. It doesn't become necessary.
But that seems to be a strange way of thinking about contingency. I mean, if you're saying that, right? I mean, yeah. What is existence meaning here? I think that it would be really good for you to think about what the existence claims you're making about yourself are in this direct experience, because you say things like it's
I'm not
A
making any.
equals A. A rock doesn't come to that conclusion.
Right. The conclusions you come to are irrelevant. It doesn't matter if you come to conclusions. You exist if there are no conclusions. You still exist regardless of your
So
ability to
this
make
is
conclusions.
pure existence,
Well, no, I don't.
independent of all other things.
I, I, I think I'd say no. So I exist. Now, I don't know what it means to exist. Maybe existence is a
That's fine.
composite
That's
of
fine.
stuff.
We're talking about pure existence.
So yeah, I don't think there is such a thing as pure existence. Existence is made of something, and I use the word existence to
Well,
refer to the
that's
something.
an immediate infinite regression. Existence is made of something. What's it made of? Well, that's made of something too. So that's made of something too. And now you just have an infinite regress.
Well, it wouldn't matter if
And
there's an infinite regress or not. That's not the point. The point is when I say existence, there is
well,
some
yeah, it matters
substance in
if there's an
reality, and
infinite regress,
it
there's no
doesn't matter if
existence.
there's an infinite regress or not. There's no logical contradiction with an infinite regress, so that wouldn't be a problem anyway. But if I can say there is
Uh,
one substance that exists like
no.
energy,
With logical claims about existence, there is a problem about an infinite regression because, right, entailment doesn't work that way. And so there's all kinds of infinite regressions that are perfectly fine, right? But infinite regression, when it comes to existence, that's going to land you into contradiction. And so, but that's okay. I think that the way that you talk about these things is revealing and it's actually very deep. And I think that you see this depth, like Kant, you see the abyss and then you draw back because it's interesting the way that it has these implications and you don't want to follow them through. And why not?
there's no implication there. Like whatever the nature of reality is, it exists. I don't know what I am, but I'm a part of reality, so I exist. So maybe it's one, maybe it's many, maybe it's platonic, maybe it's material. I don't know. I don't care. None of it matters. I still exist.
Well, I mean, to say you don't know, you don't care, that's obviously false. You have a big channel where all you do is talk about these ideas,
For the
right? You
argument, for the
do
sake of the
care.
argument, none of that matters. It's completely irrelevant. Like, is there a unicorn on Alpha Centauri? This is irrelevant to the
Okay,
argument.
but we're going in circles a little bit because if none of that matters,
To the
then
argument.
all you're talking about is the pure logic of existence.
No, because I'm talking about whatever that happens to be. I just don't care what it is for the argument.
Well, I don't care what it is either because we're talking about pure existence. I don't care what it is. Doesn't matter what it is. There's no question of what it is. In fact, the answer to that question is it isn't anything. Existence is not a thing.
That doesn't make any sense.
Sure, it does. Things exist. Existence is not a thing. Existence isn't a stuff that things are made out of, like
Right. Things
water.
exist. So, like,
Things
my
exist.
consciousness is a thing and it exists.
It exists. So tell me about its existence.
That's irrelevant to the argument. I don't need to tell you about the unicorn on Alpha Centauri either. All I need to know is it exists. Who cares
So all you
about its
know is that
existence?
your consciousness exists.
Yep.
And from that, what can you infer? If your
Infer,
answer is
well,
nothing, then I don't see the point. I
well,
mean,
the inferences there don't matter. So whether or not I can infer anything makes no difference.
okay,
It still
you made a
exists.
claim, but you've gotta stick with the claim that you just made. If the inferences don't matter, okay, let's stay
Yeah.
focused on
Yeah.
that.
Inferences don't matter.
The inferences don't matter. You made a claim,
Yep.
consciousness exists. That's one. And two, inferences from that fact don't matter.
Correct.
So, but that was an inference.
Sure.
So some inferences, they're going to be second order inferences, do matter.
Nope.
Well, then you're contradicting yourself.
Nope, because none of the inferences can make me not exist. Doesn't matter what inferences I make or don't make. My existence is independent of any of the
so
inferences.
you're a necessary being.
No, I'm still a contingent being.
If you were a contingent being, then the inferences would matter because some of those might mean you don't exist. And
No,
so
there's no,
right,
it doesn't matter what inferences I make. I can make any inferences in the world, but the fact I'm making inferences can't contradict itself. They can't stop being existing, no matter what inferences I make.
I love it. You are just talking about yourself as a necessary being.
No, I'm not. Necessary being is a being that
Okay,
exists in
so
all
then
possible worlds.
inferences
I
do
don't.
matter.
Nope, because the necessary being is a being that exists in all possible worlds, and I don't need to be that. I could be that, but there's no entailment of that in the argument,
I
so therefore it's
understand,
not a
but the
necessary being.
being, okay, so that's not the kind of necessity you're talking about. First of all, you're talking about logical necessity because you were talking about inferences. You made a claim about inferences don't matter, and that in itself was an inference, right? And so obviously inferences do matter, and you have to be very careful not to get into contradiction. So consciousness exists. Inferences, I guess inferences about it, except for this one inference. Other inferences about it, such as what it's made out of, whether it's in space or time, whether it's in silicon or carbon, whether it's a mathematical pattern or whatever, none of that matters. So the only inferences that do matter, which is an inference you yourself made to say that no inferences of those contingent kinds matter,
Nope, that
right?
inference doesn't matter either. There are no inferences that could be made that could make my existence not existence.
You're doing a lot of inference right now.
Well, it doesn't matter because again, there are
That's
no
right.
inferences. There are zero inferences that could ever be made that can make my existence non-existent. So zero inferences matter. All inferences are irrelevant because
Yeah,
none
so
of
you're
them can
talking
affect
about
my
the
existence.
logic of necessity.
No,
When you say no inferences could matter, nothing could, no matter what possible world you're in, nothing could make a difference. No inferences could make a difference no matter what world you're in, no matter
no.
whether you're in the
Inferences and
matrix.
worlds are not the same thing. So
In
those
different
are
worlds, we make
irrelevant.
different inferences.
Not necessarily. No.
Well, okay, now you're back to the logic of necessity. So,
No. Again, so my existence, I exist. The fact that I am myself, that's necessary. Law of logic. My
oh,
existence
that's an
isn't
inference.
necessary.
That's an inference because I'm not sure why is that a law of logic.
Why is that? Why is A equals A law of
Yeah, you're the
logic?
guy who brought up paraconsistency. I don't know why A equals A. Explain that to me.
Why? Because let's just presuppose it. I don't care. It's irrelevant to the
Well,
argument.
you're making inferences.
Okay,
I mean,
so
fine. I mean, I'll grant you your premises, but I'm not going to grant you that you're not making inferences when you clearly are.
no, if the object exists, it is not making inferences. If there's a rock that exists, it's not making any inferences. It just
I don't
exists.
care about what's making an inference. I care about whether an inference is made. And so you
So
say things like you exist, and then you say things like A equals A, which I take it you think is a necessary truth. It's a logical truth, and it's a truth about this existence.
so I'm referring to the consciousness in the same way I'm referring to the rock from an outside perspective. So I don't exist in this hypothetical universe. There is a rock and there is a consciousness, and they both exist. Neither one is making inferences. It doesn't matter what inferences are made. It doesn't matter what inferences I make, what inferences you make, what
Yeah, I
inferences
don't
they
care
make.
who's
All
making an
inferences are
inference.
out the window. Inferences are now gone.
No, but then you
Those
can't
exist.
say A equals A.
I don't care. They exist. What
So
I
from
say
this,
means
right.
nothing.
So from this existence, what follows?
The argument doesn't entail any following here. You don't need any following yet. They just exist, and they can
You don't
exist
need
on
any
their own.
following. So there's just pure existence.
No. Again, you're confusing epistemology and ontology. Whether I make inferences or
I
not doesn't
surely
make
am
a
not.
difference.
So there's this existence, and all you can say about the existence is it exists.
Again, what I say about it is epistemology, and it doesn't matter to what it's
Well,
actually made
no, I
of.
mean, does the existence exist or not?
Yes, that's what it means to exist.
Existence exists.
Yes, existence
Beautiful.
exists.
The one.
No, that's ontology. That's confusing epistemology and
No,
ontology.
no. Nothing further needs to be said about the one besides existence exists. In fact, that's the
Um,
only thing that can be said about it.
well, that would be false because existence could entail multiple kinds of things, and so it could be the many. So it wouldn't be the
Oh, the
one.
one unfolds into the many for sure.
No, there is no unfolding.
Absolutely.
It just is many. There's no unfolding. So there is no one.
Well, that's true. That's
Okay.
true. The one
So
is not a
then,
thing. Existence is not a thing. Existence exists, but existence is not a thing. Things exist. The one is not a thing. What
okay.
what what you have to attend to are the patterns in your speech, right? And the Platonist
Again,
is making certain claims about logic, right? And this is why and this it's interesting. I mean, I think you're hitting onto some extremely deep stuff, and you're hitting on stuff that people like, Meister Eckhart, particularly the Catholic mystics, right, and the Neoplatonists were really into, right, and also, I mean, Graham Priest too, but he comes to it from a Buddhist perspective, and so those kinds of things, yeah, that's really sharp stuff. Now, whether you want to pursue it, right, in this manner of psychologization and consciousness, right, and direct experience. Okay, look, obviously I don't do that. I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. I could be a completely stubborn, bullheaded idiot about that, right? And some of my best friends are panpsychists, and so right. But where this goes, I think, is a big, big difference in the because people are going to draw inferences and make implications, and they develop whole cultures around this.
Well, I think it
I mean,
goes
if
back
you
to our original point that it's contrasting benefits of the different approaches and which one has the better benefits. And I think my worldview is that I can admit that I exist and I have consciousness and I don't need any of these rationality stuff. I don't need to say it's an illusion. I don't need to say that the one exists and bring up the one in the many problem in philosophy. I don't need to bring up any of that. And my worldview seems to be relatable to the vast majority of other human beings on the planet. And I would argue from all time, if
well,
I could communicate with
no,
them.
that's false because the vast majority of human beings on the planet believe in God
Well, that
or
doesn't.
a God.
The vast majority of people who believe in God agree with my position, and it's more relatable to them.
Well, I think I would agree with that. The vast majority of theists, right, they're going to say the same things about consciousness and existence that you do. But I'm an atheist.
Well, I'd say the vast
And
majority of every group of human beings, other than the Dan Dennett group of people, the illusionists, which is pretty much the entirety of all human existence, would agree with me on this one.
I don't know if that's true or not, but it wouldn't make any difference to the truth, right?
True, but remember our argument was about which worldview has more advantages, and one of the advantages we brought up is what would make more compelling sense to a theist in a debate, and I think that mine has a clear advantage on this topic.
Well, you agree with the theists. I mean, I don't,
On the
right?
consciousness thing.
Yeah, well, that's all you need, man. I mean, once you've given that up, right? I mean, once you've given that up, you're right there with them.
Yes, consciousness exists. I give that one up. I'm happy to give that one up. I think that's a very good thing to give up. I think we should grant that one. Consciousness
Well, I
exists.
agree that I mean, I agree that there are things that are conscious, right? I don't agree
Qualia
that
exists. We should
consciousness
grant
exists.
qualia exists.
Yeah, you're
100%.
on the you start with the, somebody gives you like a little reefer and that's cool. It's cool. The next week you're shooting smack in the back alley. I mean, it's the gateway. Consciousness is the gateway drug, man.
Gateway drug.
The gateway drug.
Oh, that's good.
Because that's they're all just like, hey, man, just try a little consciousness, man. It's free, man. First thing, it's free, man. Don't worry. No, it's not gonna get you hooked. It's not. It's not. Come on, man. That's just bullshit, man. It's like the government. It's like the man trying to tell you that consciousness is bad stuff. You smoking? Let's smoke some consciousness, man. Yeah, and everybody's doing it. All the
It's a
cool kids are telling
conspiracy.
me
It's
it's
a
peer
conspiracy.
pressure, man. All the cool kids are into consciousness, man. Don't listen to that square Steinhart, man. What the fuck does he know, man?
It sounds, it
You
sounds
know,
sounds
you
so
know,
much like the flat earthers when they say, "Oh, it's all NASA's a entire conspiracy. All those people who believe
right?
in
Yeah,
consciousness,
man.
conspiracy. It's all there. It's
Yeah,
conspiracy. It's a conspiracy of the
yeah.
consciousness people."
The government says the Earth is round. Come on, man. Come on, man. Learn the truth. Wake up, sheeple.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, I think you like look, you got I love it because you look right into the depth, man, right into the sharpest, deepest things. And I think it's people complain, I complain. Sometimes philosophy seems like, petty little thing, but the little tiny moves you make like end up exploding into completely different worldviews and behaviors, right? And so, and this debate is happening like with intensity, right now. And for instance, I mentioned psychedelics before, but in people thinking about psychedelics, right, it's a huge war. I mean, an immense battle between people who just think like, I took DMT and I saw the self-transforming elf machines and they're real. They were more real than real. And others who say like, nah, you're just hallucinating. That's impossible. the elves were more real than real, and or they have an experience which must be about God. Ego dissolution, man, I mean, that proves God exists. And it's like, I'm skeptical about me. I don't believe anything I say. Thoughts in my head, I don't even know if they come from me. I don't know if they are thoughts. I'm constantly, beset by devils. And so, am I hallucinating all this right now? Yeah, maybe. And that doesn't really bother me. But what bothers me is the obvious fact that I can be profoundly wrong about what psychologically seems to me to be the most truthful. You know, I have a family history of depression, and I know I have learned through sad experience that my moods seem more real than anything, and they are completely illusions. Illusions of the greatest magnificence and depth and subtlety. And so, as far as I'm concerned, man, consciousness, don't trust that stuff. Don't do it. Don't take it. One line of consciousness, man, and you're hooked for the rest of your life. Consciousness addict. You gotta get it. Like, empty your bank
True.
account. Yeah, you need
Just to
more.
like go for conscious experiences. You want those quality experiences, and you spend
Oh
all your
yeah,
time and money going
gotta.
for those.
You gotta hit me up with some qualia, baby. I
Yep.
need it. Daddy needs his qualia. Yeah.
Well, we have been going for about 2 hours, and there are a few questions from the
Okay.
chat, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Shane Sommer asks, ask him if concepts exist.
That's a weird word. I mean, concepts, yeah, concepts do exist in my brain and brain structures. I mean, sometimes people mean properties when they say concepts like that, the property of mass or, charge or things like that. Yeah, sure, properties exist. We have concepts of properties, for instance, or relations exist. This thing is bigger than that thing. So we have a concept of size, right? So yeah, I just probably wouldn't say concepts.
Gotcha. Next question from Jake K. Can Dr. Steinhart expand on Neoplatonism and how it helps defeat theism, or expand how arguments like maybe Augustine's do not get to theism, but the Neoplatonic one, etc., if this makes sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, right? I mean, you see, and I just say Platonists because the Neoplatonists never called themselves that, and that was actually a Christian slur from the 1800s. That word, they just called themselves Platonists, and so right, the one in the fact that the one is not a person, and that in some sense the deities of Neoplatonism are not theistic, right? They're non-theistic. You get what's at issue here is theism, which is going to be a bunch of beliefs about persons, and as we were just talking about consciousness and mentality, right? About the fundamental, that mentality. I Josh Rasmussen, a friend, and we often talk about this kind of stuff, right? The
I
view
hit him
that,
on 3 times, I think.
yeah, he's a great guy. I love that guy. Just
Very nice person.
oh yeah, he's a wonderful guy. That mind is first in some way, right? And yeah, I think our conversation, even though the conversation here today, might have seemed a little abstract or a little esoteric, but right, when you give a radical denial to the primacy of the mental, right, you open up something different. And the existence of things like, mind independent rationality or mind independent moral laws and values, that's threatening to theists in a much deeper way than saying, like, oh, science describes reality. Because theists agree with that, right? They just say there's more. And, Platonists like me will say, like, yeah, there's more, and it's not theism. Right. And that, that can make me sound even weirder, I think, than I've been portrayed here, because, like, I'm an atheist, but I believe there are absolutely infinitely many gods. They're just not theistic. And that opens up a space for doing a different kind of theology. And that is going to be, look, atheism does not threaten theists, contemporary Anglophone atheism. It's not a threat at all. What's a threat is paganism. And that's the specter behind, all the political anxiety about theism and things like that. Right? Atheists are if we're talking about who's in minorities, atheists are a minority on any account. It's the people that are, doing witchcraft and crystals and astrology and tarot and stuff like that, or out dancing in the woods on the 8 solar holidays. That's the threat, right? Because that grows. And it grows into something very alien. It's something that Christianity tried to defeat 15 centuries ago, 10 centuries ago, and it's never been defeated. And so, the vast majority of the world, like, what, 1 or 2% might ever be somebody like Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens. But doing pagan stuff, we know that not only worked, it's survived. And so Neoplatonism, or just plain Platonism, points in a lot of and I don't mean that it points to witchcraft or magic or stuff like that, even though the later Platonists were really into magic. But it points to something different. It points to a different kind of culture. So hopefully that helps answer it.
Gotcha. Travis asks, is Eric making atheism worse in order to appeal to theists? I don't see the point.
Well, I hope I'm not making atheism worse. I mean, I'm an atheist, so maybe I'm down on myself. I need a better self-opinion. No, I don't want to make. I mean, there is a sense in sure. I mean, that's a nice question, right? I mean, yeah, I do want to appeal to theists, right? Because theists are the vast majority, certainly the vast majority in the United States, vast majority around the world. And so I think it's kind of silly if I were to just say theism is just wrong or stupid. Like, the new atheists said, oh, theists are just morons. They're just idiots. They're stupid. Well, that's really not a way to make friends. And I want to make friends, not just because I want to be a nice guy or something. I mean, I would like to be able to say, look, I like to be able to have a conversation with a theist like Josh Rasmussen. I'm not going to say, oh, you're a moron. I mean, where does that get us? So, yeah, I want to be able to appeal to them, but I don't want to make atheism worse. I want to be able to say, like, you guys are right about a lot. You're just wrong about one thing. You're wrong about the primacy of the mental. And so I don't know if that quite answers the question, right? I mean, Anglophone atheism, I wouldn't be alone in saying that Anglophone atheism already is a form of Protestantism. Lots of people have made that case. But yeah, I am critical of Anglophone atheism, right? But but the whole point is that's not the only kind of atheism. And historically, it hasn't been the only kind of atheism. So I think there are kinds of atheism that, yeah, could appeal to theists. And I sure hope there are.
Gotcha. Max Rose asks, is he a LaRoche guy? I don't know who that is.
I don't know who that is either.
All right, fair enough. Max Foster asks, would you rather be a brain in a vat with the greatest selection of qualia?
Say no to drugs. I mean, look, I've taken LSD, I've taken psilocybin, I use weed for my arthritis, and I got a medical card, and it doesn't matter; it's legal anyway in adult use in New York now. But yeah, I was in love with this girl, and I don't know if she loved me back, but I had all kind of qualia until it came to a horrible end. I mean, so I'm the experience machine, Nozick's experience machine. You could be a brain in a vat, an experience machine, and just have this wonderful hallucinatory life. Nah, I've been down that road, man. I've been down that road. We broke up. It was hard. And then I had some qualia. Let me tell you the qualia I had then. Not qualia you want to have. So no, I'd rather just be me.
Gotcha. Ask Theoros asks, ask him if it would be better to understand the world as fundamentally made up of processes and relations rather than individual objects.
Yes.
Why?
Because relational, right? Relational thinking, relational structuralism, right? And this gets funny names, like ontic structural realism or, informational structural realism. At some point, you realize what matters is the structure. What matters is the relational structure. And first of all, there are theorems in logic, right? Ramsey theorems and other kind of theorems, Skolem theorems. That all that matters is structure, and so there's a whole philosophy of that. But right, I mean, and you have problems like, well, what are the individual objects, right? Oh, I don't know what they are. They just exist. I don't know what they are. And the only thing you can say about them is relational. I think it's a different way of looking at things. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about the differences between materialism and idealism. And I came to the conclusion, as a bunch of other people did, people smarter than me, that there is no, like, Quine, there is no difference, right? That they both have exactly the same structure. And so to say, like, it's matter or it's mind, it's completely meaningless. Because the patterns of logic, the logical patterns, the patterns of inference, and the relations between things, right, just turn out to be the same on either of those, right? They're mirror images. And so that's, for instance, also, I think so I'm a big fan of structuralist thinking, right? And okay, we don't have to use the word Platonism. Let's say structuralism, right? I'm a structuralist, which means I'm a set theorist, because set theory is the theory of pure structure. And so there's a consequence right there, right? That I believe there's a single relationship. There is one relationship which unifies nature. Okay. And I can actually work that out. In fact, I can write down the theory of that relationship on the back of a postcard, right? Say the axioms of ZFC set theory. So now I can actually give some teeth to this. Right. And so, and okay, right. You don't have to agree with me, right? I can say all mathematics comes from this, physics comes from math, et cetera, et cetera. Right. But it's more interesting to see things like structure is what matters. And people have observed this, for instance, in saying things like, wow, a lot of atheist discourse, Anglophone atheist discourse, has the same structure as Protestant discourse. And it ends up, then you see something in common. You're like, wow, Anglophone atheism is just apophatic Protestant theology. Now that's not to trivialize it, right? Because apophatic theology, negative theology, right, has a long and rich history, and lots of people have been involved in it. But when you start to look at things as structure and relationships, right? And my relation with Renee was the same as my relationship with Jenny, except like, oh, but Jenny's not Renee. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You're just repeating the same damn pattern that you repeated every time, right? And then you realize that the problem is not the woman or the circumstance. The problem is the pattern. And I think that way of thinking, at least for me, not just in terms of this esoteric philosophical jargon, but in terms of like how I discover things about my own life, right? In practical facts about, health, about, romantic or sexual relationships. Yeah. Look for the pattern, look for the system of relationships, right? Why are you doing the same things? Why are you behaving the same way? Man, you know, This is why I'm skeptical about me. I don't want to believe in me. You know, if I start thinking I'm real, I get into big trouble.
Gotcha. Related question from eFont. Do you believe, or what are your views on digital metaphysics?
Yeah, love that stuff. Sure, digital metaphysics. In fact, I think I wrote the first article that had that title back in 1997. Um, yeah, I don't think quite that means the world is just like a big computer, right? I should mention that I took my first degree in computer science. I was a professional computer scientist for 9 years. And so, yes, digital metaphysics, yes, all the way. That might get into, like I said, informational structural realism, but yes.
Awesome. That is it for the questions. We've been going for
Okay.
about 2 hours and a half. Really appreciate you coming on. Do you
Yeah.
want to give any links or references to people where they can find your work?
I do have a website. Sure, that would be probably the main thing. And it's www.ericsteinhart.com. You can find pretty much everything that I do there if I can post it. It is. I will have a book coming out on atheistic Platonism. In fact, that's the title. Atheistic Platonism. It's in production now, and so it should be published at the very beginning of December. It'll be published with Palgrave Macmillan. And, I don't know what it'll cost or how it'll be distributed. It's not under my control. Once you sign contracts, other people take charge. But that should be out, assuming no supply chain issues, in early December. And that sets out the stuff with, greater detail.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yes, thank you. It was a great conversation, really, really fascinating. And I'm really happy that we talked. I mean, I think you got, yeah, I do lots of podcasts and stuff, and people do not ask questions I got no need to kiss ass here, man. But people do not ask questions at that depth, right? And that's not just about, oh, you must have read a lot of stuff and thought about it. It means like, wow, those are questions like at depth.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, no, and I'll say again as a closing comment about me, I might be wrong about everything. Every single position I've taken, I could be wrong. What's important is to go into that depth and struggle with those kinds of questions. That's the most important thing.
It's the purpose of philosophy.
Yes, it is. All
Awesome.
right.
Well, absolutely. Thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it. I have to go run and pee before I pee my pants, and I'll talk to you later.